You think that's air you're breathing now?
Grimerica.
Based on your political background or whatever side of the spectrum you're on, that explain, or at least attempt to explain, or do their best to explain, like the nature of reality or where we came from. And those are, of course, science and religion.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica show. We're going to be chatting with Niles Heckman a little bit later. And we got Red Pill Junkies going to join us. We're going to get to some of our remote viewing feedback, give you what we came up with. But first, as always, Soylent Graham is people. How's it going, buddy?
Speechless. Soylent Graham is people. I like it. Get your cup of Soylent Graham.
Soylent Graham is people. Or Soylent Green.
Yeah.
That was from Justin.
Was it?
He sent it over to me. Texted it.
Have you really seen that movie?
No.
Darren?
I watched it a long time ago. I remember like acting it out when we were kids. Going around screaming. It was like our thing for a while.
Yeah.
I just vaguely remember it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen it. Actually, maybe I have a long time ago. Vague. So yeah, we've got Niles Heckman on. That's an interesting chat. He's, an artist, one of these guys that worked in the movie studios in digital arts and stuff like that. And he kind of sort of woke up and realized that some of the movies he was making, graphics for, kind of like a version of reality. And it's pretty interesting. I listened to his podcast before I went to Vegas, and it really made me think differently about the arts.
And then
yeah,
we know what happened after that.
Yeah.
How's it going, Red?
Oh, you had to ask. Well, let's just say that my life has turned really, really interesting in the Chinese sense of the word.
I don't know the Chinese sense of the word.
May you live an interesting life or something like that?
Yeah, but they use it as a curse.
Oh, do they?
Oh, yes. So one man's curse could be another man's blessings. Maybe that's my case because, in short, I got fired last week.
No, you got laid off, right?
Well, laid off, terminated, given the boot. How many similes you want me to bring
slip.
forth? Yeah, no, a pink slip. My employer's too cheap to waste in a good pink slip.
Obviously, he doesn't listen to the show.
Maybe he does. Maybe that's a problem.
And if you did, I really don't give a fuck anymore.
Well, I think this is a challenge, and that's going to end up being a huge positive thing in your life.
Oh, God willing.
Yeah. No, I seriously think if you can embrace that possibility, you could really manifest what you want and desire. I know it sounds so cliche and all that, but I'm serious.
Springboard that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Springboard.
Do I need to raise my vibrations then?
Fuck yeah.
Or don't.
There's
So
nothing
how
wrong
do
with
I-
trying.
How do I do that then?
It's just hard work, dedication, and you just gotta. I guess it kind of is like you just gotta visualize it. And
Quiet your mind down and focus on what you desire, right? Find out what you desire and then start feeling the emotion of having that what you desire, like doing what you love for a living.
Don't start a podcast, so
And
there's
you'll
no
start-
money in it.
Yeah, you're welcome to come on here as much as you want, but don't start your own. Yeah.
It will not pay the bills. Speaking of which, we're moving. We've set move day 10 days from today. Yeah, 10 days from today ish.
Yeah.
You're moving again?
We're moving to our new studio.
Oh yeah, the new igloo.
The igloo, the actual
The
igloo.
Igloo
real
2.0.
The real igloo.
It's really more like a bunker, but we'll still call it the igloo.
Well, it was a freezer.
The walls are like 4 inches thick and weigh like 300 pounds.
Well, better a bunker than an outhouse.
But yeah, my electrician buddy's coming over to wire it up this weekend, and we got the internet figured out, so we're good to, or we think we have the internet figured out anyway.
Yeah, it is like a Faraday cage, so I don't know.
They wrote it in there.
Yeah,
I read an article the other day about this like $3 million department in San Francisco, which was, according to the sellers, EMF proof.
If it is a Faraday cage, it's good. That means we'll still be able to record after the EMP goes off.
And I don't think they were concerned about the MEP as much as the idea of maybe insulating the owners for some kind of, I don't know. I think that one of the things that were mentioning in the article was how the police can use some kind of radar devices in order to
Sting. I think it's called Sting. Yeah,
like see the people inside a building, like some kind of X-ray machine.
Yeah.
Which kind of is an legal conundrum. Is that like searching your house without a warrant? Even though they're technically outside the building.
Patriot. Blah, Jesus.
The Patriot Act,
motherfucker.
I think that's happened. I think that's happened in San Francisco before, Red, and people have talked about it. I've heard that, on the No Agenda show where it's an actual thing, right? When they have like a crime event happen and they come in with their sting operation, like literally, I think they can access everybody's phones right then and there. They can drain your batteries, or they can see, like you're saying, see the locations through the walls. They could probably even activate your emergency system on your phone. I mean, it is pretty creepy.
Yeah. I also read another article, different one, about these airplanes that are being chartered by the FBI, sorry. Some kind of surveillance program. I mean, these are not drones. These are, small single engine planes, flying at low altitude on neighborhoods, doing God knows what.
Huh, that's interesting.
And creepy.
Yeah, like, so they could be utilizing that same technology and flying around. Maybe spraying chemtrails while they're at it. Kill two birds with one stone.
That's too low for a chemtrail.
You had to go there, man.
Before we go there,
I want to still
ask
a question about the $3 million apartment. So that's obviously the price for a little condo, like probably like 1,000 square foot condo or something.
Maybe it was 7 million. I can't recall.
That's
right
3
now.
million. That makes sense. I mean, so what do? They put lead in the walls or something like that, or they put covered in a sort of some thin foil or aluminum or something like that?
If you give me 1 minute to open my notes.
So it could be kind of like the tinfoil hat apartment.
Yeah, they actually promoted it that way.
Oh,
like
did they really?
One big tinfoil. Well, no, sorry, that was actually how an article mentioning that apartment. It is.
But it might save you from any MP too, right, or something. I mean, maybe this is a trend.
I mean, maybe
trendsetters.
they were thinking of those people who complain about
Wi-Fi and stuff. Yeah. And I actually think there is a case for that. How about that? The conspiracy. Now the tables are turned, because I really think there's a case for people who really get sick because of electromagnetic fields. Should we have a guy on to talk about that?
Oh,
wait. We did.
Oh, wait, we did. And it was the only one we lost. That was in the lost episodes era. And that was the one unrecoverable episode, was the guy talking about digital harm. I mean, that could be a conspiracy, really.
Okay, here it is. The apartment was 8.5 million. asking price.
Holy shit.
And I think that here it is. The home's electromagnetic profile was achieved by applying heavy graphite-based paints on all interior surfaces. Conductive wire tape was then applied in a large network connecting the walls, floors, and ceilings. Finally, the windows were coated with transparent EMF-resistant films. Taken as a whole, these measures prevent electromagnetic signals from entering the apartment. It is a live-in Faraday cage, an enclosure made from conductive materials named after 19th century inventor Michael Faraday, who discovered how to block and redirect electrical fields.
I wonder how you'd feel after staying in there for a month.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
dream more or dream less.
I mean, I listened to an old Mysterious Universe episode. Well, not that old, I think like a week old, when they interviewed this guy who wrote a book about how our current light pollution has making us all sick.
Yeah.
It has really disrupted our endocrinous cycles and all that. It has made us grow weight. Has made us lose sleep. So who knows? Maybe living in a house completely devoid of any kind of electrical fields could actually improve your health in ways we are really not aware of right now.
That'd be interesting to see.
It will be kind of imagine a kind of experiment in which you get two identical twins, kind of having the same health status, and having one of them, live for a year or two inside a normal house, bombarded with Wi-Fi and normal electrical lighting and all that, and the other, living in some kind of hut, without any kind of electrical appliance or electromagnetic fields, and then compare the two, you see what kind of changes.
Kind of sicko.
Well, no, then you could have other experiments where you'd have two twins that are staying together. No, like just wait,
Hopefully
just listen to me.
No more twins are listening to the show.
Oh, then two of them could stay in the same environment and see how they communicate and connect together, living in that Faraday-ish environment, and then compare that to other twins that live in a zone where there's lots of electronic interference, and see how that affects them. And it's weird. When I went to Vancouver last week and I started dreaming, I had more.
And force them to be psychic.
I had dreams that I dreamt more in Vancouver for some reason.
Did you?
Yeah.
I read an article on The Guardian about Richard Dawkins, and there's a quote by him that really, it didn't surprise me that much. Basically said that the man has never dreamt and he has never had any kind of nightmares. So
man as in mankind?
No, man as in Richard Dawkins. He says,
"Oh, that man."
Yeah, Richard Dawkins says that he has never dreamt or had any nightmares in his whole life.
Well, that explains it.
Maybe.
Does he think they're real?
Good question.
That is interesting, though, how it comes down to experience. Like, how much has that affected his life over decades?
Yeah, like the amazing Randy says that he's never drunk any alcohol or partaken on any kind of hard drugs. And to each his own, but maybe that's one of the reasons why these guys have such a narrow worldview.
Yeah, that is interesting. Surprises me with Randy.
NWV, narrow worldview.
Narrow worldview. I like that. Don't get too carried away.
Oh my god, now you're having...
Profound UFO Quote of the Week.
Alright, I had a feeling you'd be trying to snag me there. So this is a good one, I think, is on August 5th, 1929, something remarkable. We were in our camp in the Kukanor district, not far from the Humboldt chain. In the morning, about 9:30, some of our carabiners noticed a remarkably big black eagle flying over us. 7 of us began to watch this unusual bird. At the same moment, another one of our carabiners remarked, "There is something far above the bird," and he shouted in his astonishment. We all saw in a direction from north to south something big and shiny reflecting the sun, like a huge oval moving at great speed. Crossing our camp, the thing changed in the direction from south to southwest, and we saw how it disappeared in the intense blue sky. We even had time to take our field glasses and saw quite distinctly an oval form with shiny surface, one side of which was brilliant from the sun. That's from Nicholas Roerich, Altai Himalaya, Roerich Museum, New York.
Altai Himalaya.
Yeah, I knew that one already, and it's interesting because it kind of gets connected with the legend of Agartha and the hidden kingdoms of the enlightened ones. You know,
Who?
Shambhala and all. You know, you guys have heard about Shambhala.
Yeah,
and
but
all
I didn't
these.
hear what you said at first there. McCarthy or something like that? What did you say?
Agartha.
Oh, okay.
So it's this kind of like the idea that maybe the UFO phenomenon is connected with these enlightened masters, ascended masters, that used to contact Madame Blavatsky, and all those theosophist guys.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there's definitely a direct connection between the Theosophical Society and the early contactees. Like for example, George Adamski. I mean, he was a member of the Theosophical Society.
I don't think I knew that.
Oh well, now you do.
Yeah.
If you don't know, now you know.
That's
Speaking
interesting.
of know, what do you know about the location of the remote viewing exercise?
Oh, the location, yeah. Well, is it a location? Why do you say location?
Because I've seen it.
Can't it be a, what? Oh, you saw it, did you? Can't it be an object, person, place, or thing?
I don't know, probably.
Okay, do you want me to talk about some of it? Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
Okay, so people... So we had the episode we should give a little bit of a background, shouldn't we, before we start jumping into this?
Sure.
With John Herlosky about remote viewing. And John, it was all spontaneous, but John said, well, why don't I give you some coordinates and you guys can remote view this, and then I'll send you the thing later. So we talked about getting the listening audience involved, and people started sending in their remote viewing. So we're going to go through some of that now, and then we'll talk about John's... the real thing. He's going to send it to us. So we haven't seen it, and we have tried not to look at or watch any of the read any of the emails from people. So it's kind of spontaneous here, and I'm being distracted by Napoleon's remote viewing picture. Have you seen it?
Yeah, it's hilarious.
What is it? A guy in a green shirt.
It's a guy in a Wisconsin shirt. Doesn't he have a cheese on his head too?
Yeah, he's got a block of cheese on his head.
And he's grabbing ass.
And he's grabbing somebody's ass. Well, he's almost grabbing somebody's ass. Oh, a Packer. Oh, he's a Green Bay Packers fan. So if he's got cheese on his head, does that mean he's Canadian? And we know a Green Bay Packers fan.
Yeah,
because Cheesehead is Canadian. So it's a Canadian
Cheesehead
Green
is
Bay.
a Packers thing.
Yeah, that's from Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin cheese? Because it could be construed as a Canadian Packers fan.
It's not.
You sure?
Packers, there's like fucking 10,000 cheeseheads in the stadium when they play.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plumber has one.
I knew that, and I'm not even a football fan.
Okay. Well, I know that Canadians are cheeseheads as well. So
we'll have to throw what?
You've never heard of that?
No.
What? What about you, Red? Have you ever heard the Americans call Canadians cheeseheads?
No, never.
Oh, there you go. So it's a double entendre.
Or you just made it up.
Okay, so you are the cheeseheads.
G word for that.
Napoleon lives in Quebec. He'll know about the cheeseheads.
So you are the cheeseheads. We are the beaners. What makes the Americans then? What are the Americans?
Gringos.
Yeah, we'll leave that one. So here's another one.
Like 90% of the audience is American.
Yeah, exactly.
They're great people.
Yeah, they're great people. The land of the free, home of the brave.
And they watch our back.
That's right.
Because we have a standing army of like 15,000.
So here's another one. This is from Mark. He says, subscriber since episode 47, could not for the life of me open up the portal and experience 21056611, which is the coordinates we got from John. Perhaps I need to bring my heart rate down to 10 beats per minute per second for better results. 10 BPS, he said.
Who's this, sorry?
This is Mark. Mark H. He tried for several nights before he went to sleep. All I saw was mountains, monuments, and madness. Keep up the great work. Don't forget to inform the listeners that if you get 50 subscribers, what happens, Darren?
I can't remember.
A heroic dose for you and Joey. So I should be plugging this every week. If you want to subscribe monthly to any, I think it's $5 a month, you can get a Grimerica email address. And when we get to 50, Darren and Joy, heroic dose, and we'll do like the Shroom sequel.
We'll see. I'll have to dig that up. I don't remember saying that. We're not. Oh my God!
Of course you did. You remember saying that.
Well,
you said it on a couple episodes. Don't be denying
whatever
it now.
Happened to Pat O? Pat O was going to do one for us too.
He was going to participate along with you online. So Pat O will remember. See, you do remember. You're just playing around. Okay. Maybe Red. Let's. If enough people donate, we'll fly Red up here and do it with Darren. Right,
how many?
That's going to take a lot of donations.
Yeah, that will take a lot of donations. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Maybe we can let's manifest that.
Manifest.
There you go. There you go. Red, desire that one, and we'll make it happen.
Okay, I will draw a sigil.
That's right. Hey,
first we got to manifest.
It worked for us before, Red.
Oh, it has worked for me too.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I remember you and I both told our sigil stories. So, yeah, there you go. So I got another one here from Ryan, and he says... so
wait, what's mountains and monuments? That's what...
Mountains, monuments, and
Mars or Egypt.
What do you mean? That's what you're taking from that?
Yeah.
All right, do what you want with that. All I get is a mental picture of a story, light-colored North American-style house with a dark door, sunny sky, and a green grass lawn. A dark-colored vehicle parked in a driveway to the right of the house in front of a detached garage. Also, a large tree on the lawn approximately 20 to 30 feet high. Bizarre. And he said that's interesting. So that was from Ryan. Thanks, Ryan. If I
Ryan
miss...
S?
Yeah. If
from
I miss...
Brandon.
Yes, you probably got it right this time. What did you usually say? Winnipeg?
Winnipeg.
Yeah. So this is from Chris. No, it's not from Chris, is it? Oh yeah, maybe. I thought this was tied into another email we got too. Anyways, if I've missed any of these, feel free to send them in or resend them because my inbox is quite a mess right now. I was just out of town for a few days and it's always hard to catch up with the phone and the laptop. He says, well, I didn't really do the thing. This is from Chris P. I mean, I didn't get into trance or anything, just writing while I'm listening. So my first visual was like an arch, maybe you might see with a bridge. But then there was this tower-like thing with like corner spires, almost like an old-fashioned clock tower. Oh, well, I'm too lazy to do real prep for this. It will be interesting to see, though. So thanks, Chris. Believe me, I have a hard time with this, too.
With remote viewing?
Yeah. So Matt sent in a sketch. Hey, man, did a quick remote view sketch on the coordinates, and I attached it. This is what I saw. And this is from Matt. It's kind of got a brown background with a gray almost like a clock head in there with an arm, like a straight arm across it with some little knobbies. It's almost like a machine of some sorts.
Let me see.
Well, how do you do that? You have to come around here. Keep talking. Yeah.
That's Coral Castle.
Ooh. You think that's cool?
Who
are you to interpret everybody else's
Hey,
sketches?
at least I'm not rating them. Coral Castle, Ed Leedskin's machine. Bang.
You can tell how scientific this is. Darren's like just interpreting them and writing them down on the table. That's it. How about yours?
Oh, wait. Let me do yours first while I queue up.
Oh, I don't know.
You don't have one? What about you, Red? You want to try on the fly?
No.
Okay, honestly, this was tough. I didn't really get much, but a couple things came to mind. It was like this.
Oh, you drew a picture?
No, it's not really a picture. It's just a little sketch. I kind of had orange and cold came to mind in like a rough circular thing. And I thought maybe it was like a basketball came to mind, actually, an orange rough, like basketball. I don't know if that's like a stand or something like that. And then...
Or a trampoline.
And then a red-shaped pear. A red-shaped pear came to mind. So I feel somewhat silly, but that's what I got.
That's not bad. I didn't write it. I just envisioned.
You didn't write anything down? There's no proof of what you're just making up right now to correlate with all the other listeners' feedback?
No.
And people are supposed to trust us when you don't even write down your remote viewing test?
I'm saying it before every
Can you believe this, Red?
Nope.
Why do I have to write it down?
Well, that was what
I'm
you're supposed to
recording
do.
it on a podcast before I know the answer. That's the same thing.
No, it's not. You've heard everybody else's stuff.
You can't tell me how to remote view, dude. No, I didn't make it. I didn't.
You could be making it up right now.
I'm not. I'm trying to get into my email on the tablet because I can't. Do you have that little blue cord?
Blue cord.
That's small enough to fit into the slot of my phone.
I'll
so
check.
I can play the
Okay,
voice.
you can talk about your thing while I check.
So I was lying in bed when I did it last night. And I visioned. And for a while I didn't see nothing. And then I seen a little point, I think, in the Pacific Ocean. And it was up it seemed like it was up farther north near Japan. Not near Japan, but kind of up higher, like that level, not down low by like Hawaii and shit. And then, so at first I thought it was Easter Island, but Easter Island's a lot farther south. So I don't know what it is, but something in the North Pacific. Unless maybe John thinks Easter Island's in the North Pacific.
Where is Easter Island? In
South Pacific.
Is it really considered South Pacific?
Yeah, it's like off the west coast of South America.
So you don't think you got Easter Island, though, even though that's the logo of our podcast?
No, I think it's something North Pacific.
So did you see an island? Did you see an island, or did you see a point? Like you saw a point?
I just seen a point.
Like it could be the consolidation of radiation from Fukushima?
Yeah, it could be anything. I just seen a point.
Okay.
You think I made that up from the listeners' feedback?
No.
Perfect.
Okay, good.
So now I'll play our buddy Wayne. He's a big supporter of the show.
Wayne
from Med Hat.
Oh, all right. Yeah, thanks, Wayne.
No, where do I have it? This is always a bit of a fucking production.
Hey boys, on those coordinates, I think we're looking at Yellowstone. Has something to do with the military, American Army, and vertical structures. Yellowstone, American Army, tall standing vertical structures. And that's about it. Thanks. Oh, this is Wayne at a Medicine Hat. See ya.
Thanks, Wayne. I like that we got a voicemail of it instead of an email.
Yeah. See, that's what I bring to the table.
That's kind of a creepy one.
Creepy one?
Mm.
Maybe like the U.S. government is making he just sent us to Yellowstone, but Wayne picked up on the fucking containment system they're trying to make to stop the supervolcano from erupting in 2019.
Oh, you're thinking in a positive light.
Yep.
What do you think, Red?
About volcano in 2019?
Whatever.
Yeah,
whatever.
surely there will be a volcano erupting in 2019.
A supervolcano?
That part,
No.
Darren just made all that up.
I did just
What?
make all that up. I haven't heard any rumors or I'm not privy to anything. So what else we got? Do we have the answer yet?
Well, no, we don't have the answer yet. I'm hoping to get it. Honestly, like I'm hoping to get it any minute. And if it doesn't come, we're gonna have to squeeze it into the outro. And if it doesn't come by then, it might have to be next episode. But we really don't like to do that. So I'll follow up as best I can without being a total nuisance.
No, you can't email them again.
I think. Well, maybe I got the wrong email or something.
So just try variations.
So yeah, what else? So we want to talk about supporting the show a little bit. It's funny because when we were talking to Niles, this is the episode that's coming up here, he was mentioning gas, and it's funny because the photographers used to have this term for gear acquisition syndrome, and so we kind of need gas money. I hate to say it, but we've got gas. I got to admit it. Like really, we do have some gear acquisition syndrome, considering we just bought a $400 sound booth for the garage. So that could be considered gear.
And now the little internet transfer device to transfer the internet to the garage.
Yeah.
And now a new router.
And electricity and the new digital recorder I used on the road trip.
At least the digital recorder was paid for, actually.
Paid for by donations.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
And so you guys can thank your donations, our subscribers mostly. Thank our subscribers for the episodes of the bonus episodes that'll be coming out shortly. About Grimerica. He's fucking starting to edge me out.
Red, I was at George Norian Friends. So I also was at a VR studio, Cloudhead Games. So I just
I saw that photo of you. Wearing the Oculus.
Well, it's actually a Vive, so be careful with that one.
Oh, excuse me.
Oculus style, but it's a Vive. It's a Vive headset.
Oh,
yeah. So it uses lasers to sense where you are in the room, so you can walk around in the virtual environment.
What kind of virtual environment was that?
It was like a fantasy game, like a adventure game kind of thing. I was just in the demo of it.
Tell the truth, Graham. Were there boobs?
Boobs?
Yeah.
No.
Come on.
Did you win the game?
No. It's just a demo. I just did a couple different demos. It's really good. And
how did it compare to what we were doing?
Oh, it's way better. Yeah.
Like nothing like it.
It's a different world, right? Really.
Compared to what we were trying to do here with the Oculus?
The Oculus? Yeah. And it doesn't make you feel sick at all either. So I was walking around in a room.
Scoob's going to hit you up.
Yeah. I was walking around in a room, picking things up, throwing them, and like touching things and grabbing things. And it's pretty cool. It's going to be pretty amazing. Yeah. Walking through this cave and walking up and down the hill in this cave. And like, it's pretty cool.
In total VR?
Yeah. Totally.
Do you have to walk in place or you just walk?
No, you just walk around.
Can you see outside of the VR? Like, could you walk just right into the wall?
I could if I wasn't careful.
So it was like Skyrim?
Like kind of like Myst in a way.
Okay.
Do you remember that game?
Didn't play it.
Yeah, either did I really, but it's sort of that type. So it's like I don't know what Skyrim is like. I'm not really a gamer, so I'm not the best person to demo VR games, but it was a good experience. And I'll talk more about it on this episode that I recorded while I was out there on this digital recorder. So we're going to put that out as its own little solo extra episode.
Interesting.
Yeah. While you were doing that, I was out on my first motorcycle poker run.
How'd that go, buddy?
It went excellent.
Poker?
Yeah, had a blast. I didn't get a very good hand. Or actually, I ended up getting 2 pair on both hands, but it wasn't close to good enough. I think the winning hand was 4 deuces.
4 deuces, wow.
And then after we had to run because the one guy was running out of gas.
Gas, grass, or ass. Nobody rides for free.
And I figured I was good to go because I didn't even hit my reserve tank yet. My reserve tank still gives me another like 40 kilometers or 30 kilometers I'm supposed to get on my reserve. So we went cruising and we went into Millerville and see if that gas station was open. I missed a turn off, so I had to go up the road to find some place to turn around. And they went and headed into Turner Valley, and I fucking ran out of gas.
No way.
Oh.
Yeah. In the middle of fucking nowhere. My cell phone was dead. I ran out of gas, so I was like, okay, whatever. It's only like 8K or 12K to Turner Valley. I'll just turn on my reserve. So I turned on my reserve tank. I got like maybe fucking 2,000 feet. Ran out of gas again. Fucking nothing. So then I had to push the bike probably like 2 or 3K.
Wow.
And then some random dude drove by. Like nobody would stop. Bikes going by, cars going by.
Were you putting your thumb out or anything? I mean, were you trying to ask for help?
No, I was just pushing the bike. But
Stubborn.
Yeah. Well, what am I going to do? Like, I didn't really have a plan of what I would do if I flagged someone over. What I was hoping is I was going to push my bike over the next hill and there'd be a gas station down there.
Yeah.
But then some dude stopped and he's like, "Can I help you, man?" I was like, "Only if you got some gas." He's like, "I'll go get you some."
I've got gear acquisition syndrome.
So he ran to his house and got me a little jerry can of gas.
Oh,
And
you
then
know the name of that good Samaritan?
I do not. And then I didn't have any cash on me, so I said, "Well, if you give me your email address," I said, "I'll email you so like fucking some cash to cover the gas at least. It's the least I can do." And he was like, "Nope, just pay it forward."
Wow.
Now that is an enlightened being right there.
Did you at least tweet him? No?
I don't know his name.
No,
Nothing.
nothing, eh?
He's just a stranger. Maybe he doesn't even exist. He's just ethereal, my guardian angel.
Oh my
Your
God.
guardian
yeah.
angel. I was just going to say that.
I had no water. Pushing my fucking bike. Oh, I was fucking aggravated, man.
Were you, or did you take it pretty calm?
I took it pretty good.
Yeah.
I had an emergency kit.
Really? What was the first thing you did when you ran out of gas?
Pulled out my header. It was brutal.
You need to.
That won't happen again because my bike's old, right? It's an 82, so it doesn't have a gas gauge or fuck all.
You need to add an extra battery charger for you in your emergency kit.
Yeah, my emergency kit doesn't have power. Well, my emergency kit for my bike is one 10 mil wrench. Anything I can't fix on there with a 10 mil wrench, I can't fix on the side of the road.
Interesting. So I missed the part about how the guy had the gas. What happened with that?
He had to run to his house.
Really? He ran to his house and came back with a jerry can?
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
It was quite the fucking afternoon. Really, it only probably slowed down my day by like half an hour or 40 minutes tops.
Yeah.
But I was pushing a fucking 300-pound
But
motorcycle.
did you lose the whole rest of the event and all that and all the
No,
guys?
it was already
or?
over.
Oh, it was already over and you're on your way home.
I won a door prize of a Harley clock.
A
in the
Harley
garage.
clock?
Yeah, it's in the garage.
Nice.
It was nice. It was a good day.
Right on. So yeah, we now we really do need gas money.
Well, now I watch my odometer pretty. Now that I know I don't have a reserve tank, I won't go past the gas station.
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm glad you had a good time.
I did till I ran out of gas.
Yeah. So the donations do help, though. We do want to say, get back to that for a second. It's just we do have fixed expenses, and there's more and more to sort of keep up with. It seems like, so we appreciate everybody helping out.
Yeah, we do what we can. We try and shoot out some extra episodes now and again, and
we're pretty booked for the next month.
Yeah, going into year 3 now. Officially into your first episode of year 3. No, can't be. Second.
I'm not sure.
No calendar.
What do you think, Red? Has it gone by fast for you since you've been sort of on this journey with us?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it really doesn't feel like it was 1 year ago. I mean, I was the second guest in Grimerica, right? So that really literally means that this is 1 year of being part of Grimerica for me.
2 years.
2 years, sorry. So, yeah, it's Terence McKenna, I think, probably was right when he postulated that time is accelerating.
Yeah, seems like it.
So you were all fucking smiles over there. Did you get a response?
I got our answer, our remote viewing answer, just in time. John must be remote viewing us, and he knows exactly when we need it.
Should we wait for the outro?
I don't know. Should we? That's not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah.
No, I think
keep people in the cliffhanger.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, then hopefully they don't fast forward the interview.
Yeah, that's the thing. I want to listen to Niles. He's a fascinating dude.
Well, some people will and some people won't.
Or they'll fast forward, then they'll go back.
Yeah.
That's okay, I guess.
Most people will just wait.
Do you have anything else you want to mention, Red, before we move on?
Let's see. I have one interesting news article just for Darren.
Yes.
Related to his favorite theory that we are all living in a simulation and that
patent pending.
The inside of a tree doesn't exist until you cut it down and observe it.
I stole that from Jimmy Elvidge, I think, actually. But...
So this is an article from the Independent titled "Reality Doesn't Exist Until You Look at It. Pioneering Quantum Physics Experiment Finds." So some kind of quantum experiment that proves that reality doesn't exist until it's measured, at least for the very, very small things. That seems that objects really choose a given state until they are observed or measured, at the quantum level. Reality at the quantum. If there were some kind of quantum trees, that we could cut down, there would really don't have any kind of insight out until we observed it. So it's interesting. It's an interesting idea of how much of the observer effect, really
simulation.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, I'm going to send you guys a link to a very interesting YouTube video from this series that is really, really cool, Closer to Truth, in which the guy, I think his last name is Kuhn, he goes and interviews a lot of really, celebrity physicists, like, well, the names escape me right now.
Theoretical physicists or real physicists?
Theoretical physicists and cosmologists.
Yeah.
Alan Guth was one of them. Alan Guth is the guy who first proposed the idea of the inflationary theory.
Mm-hmm.
So the question he posed to these guys is whether if our universe is like a computer in the metaphorical sense of the word, or if it's actually a real, a true computer. And the answer seems to be yes, that the universe really acts like a computer because it processes information, on all levels, in all kind of, in a very systemic way. That remember what we were discussing with Alex Akiris and Connor Habib, how Connor disliked the idea of equating the universe with a machine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the one who said that, well, maybe we are thinking of the computer as of the universe as a computer because we live in the age of computers. So, the same way that 200 years ago, people saw the universe as this giant clockwork machine, But these guys are saying, no. I mean, the universe really is like a computer in the literal sense of the word.
So is it in an episode, Darren, that we talked about where the computer would save energy by not creating the rest of the world around it until you see it, like until it's being observed, it gets constantly created and recreated as it gets observed?
No, I think once it's there, it's there.
Oh, so it's just ever expanding depending on how we look at it.
Until we cut into the tree, then the center of the tree didn't have to exist. So, the smallest things we could ever find were the smallest things at that time. But the moment we figured out a way to break those apart, then it had to throw something there.
Or not throw it there, but expose it. Maybe.
No, literally throw it there.
Literally created it.
If it's a simulation, it's literally creating.
So the farther we look out into the solar systems and the more planets we see, they're creating those planets as we're viewing them.
Yeah, be the same idea, yeah. So no matter how far we look, we'll never run out of things to look at. That's why the universe is expanding.
Wow.
Whoa.
Patent pending.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea to ponder upon.
So, Red, the perfect job for you will exist as soon as you look at it.
I stole that.
Okay.
Right? As soon as you look for it, as soon as you visualize that job, it can exist. Based on this theory.
Okay, as long as I don't end up in some kind of Schrodinger cubicle, The Schrodinger cubicle is the one in which the employee is either working or not, depending on whether his boss is observing.
That's funny. Right on. So I think we're going to have you stick around for the outro, Red, because we want to hear if anybody fared well in this experiment. Is that cool?
Okay. Well, it's getting kind of late here, and I have to finish up with the Daily Grail news briefs.
Okay. Alrighty. Do you want to hang on? We won't be long.
It'll be 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes. I can do that.
All right, buddy. All right. So stay tuned for Niles Heckman, everybody. It's a fascinating chat about all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, and we will see you in the outro where we reveal the actual location and see if any of us are Project Stargate material.
All right.
Okay, guys, in Grimerica tonight, we're going to be chatting with Niles Heckman about all sorts of fun stuff, consciousness-based. First, how's it going, buddy? New model UFO?
Hey, not too bad. We'll talk about that later. I just bought a model for the studio.
Oh, you're not referring to a real UFO that crash landed in your backyard?
No. I think I have gas, though. apparently. Gear acquisition syndrome is what you call it.
Yes, it's a street photographer term for
Oh.
continuously buying equipment and you just can't stop. So you guys have gas for podcast hardware.
Does that include like black lights
ornaments.
and psychedelic posters and stuff?
Yeah, lava lamps and things. It does. It includes the whole shebang.
It does, eh? Oh shit. I definitely have that. Oh man, so we've got Niles Heckman here, and this is going to be interesting. He's got his own podcast. What's it called again, Niles?
It's called Novelty Generators.
Right, it's right in my thing here, yeah.
Yeah, and that name isn't really just based off of like, hey, it's just a new interesting thing. It's because it's not like that. It's kind of a philosophical way that I put it, because there's this philosopher named Alfred North Whitehead who had this kind of interesting theory that the universe is kind of always in search for creativity and originality in everything it does. And then that was kind of further expanded upon by, other people, that idea. So I kind of just branded the podcast with that label. And it's interesting because, the podcast is kind of a tertiary thing I do, but it started out as one thing and then it kind of has grown into something else. But it's just a nice kind of side thing I do, is like a side research project in some ways. And then in other ways, it's like just an enjoyable, casual conversation thing that of people that I'm interested in interacting with and talking to and building networks off of, and just guests that talk about all sorts of kind of broader spectrum stuff, similar to what you guys have here.
Yeah, we totally get that. Yeah, I had a feeling the name of your podcast had some pretty deep meaning. I've noticed after listening to a lot of them that you have some pretty deep conversations. So like in Grimerica, we touch on some of the stuff you talk about, but I think that in some ways we're kind of missing that artist / creativity piece. Like we've had some artists on before and all, but you get into some pretty deep philosophy over it. And you've had experience as an on-set visual effects supervisor, right? At some pretty crazy movies, like culturally changing movies like Matrix and Avatar. So I wanted to just mention to the listeners about that. And lately you've been making some short films and starting to create stuff on your own. And then I want to also get into, for sure, like the sort of, I don't know what to call it, if it was like a spiritual awakening or something. I mean, I don't want to, there's pretty a lot of terms that don't suffice for things like that, but you kind of had a shift in your life. So we're always interested in talking about that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of us have. So yes, I'm an artist and filmmaker, and I have a kind of background working in Hollywood, kind of in different multidisciplines as an artist, kind of in various areas of post-production on big production studio movies. And then I've also kind of worked in the kind of LA slick commercial industry, and then kind of the game cinematic industry, because games are becoming so cinematic these days. And I still kind of have one foot in that. But yeah, these days I've kind of become more of a independent filmmaker / researcher. And a lot of my kind of subject matter is kind of focusing on kind of more philosophical things and kind of not so mainstream things that are kind of trying to be a bottom-up paradigm, and kind of the opposite of the Hollywood top-down paradigm, because of course Hollywood is so kind of, it's pros and cons, but it's so celebrity worship and kind of, champagne red carpet dreams, and it creates culture for people that it isn't necessarily always the greatest culture, because of course so many Hollywood movies are just kind of always the same thing over and over again with a nice wrapper. But it's like, every Hollywood movie, it's like, we've got a giant monster, send in the military, and or like here's my next pitch. We got aliens, send in the military, or like, we got an army of zombies, send in the military. It's like that's every Hollywood big budget movie for the most part.
Yeah, well, not to get too conspiratorial, but did you notice that a lot being in Hollywood, that like the D&D, like the Department of National Defense, has a role in all this?
I guess I didn't work on any big studio movies as an artist that were like kind of massive world is ending military destruction stuff. But it's funny you asked that, because I know that there are certain productions that get made that have the backing of the military because of the kind of raw, jingoistic aspect of how they portray our strength and might through defense and things like that. In kind of, a lot of movies kind of feel like they're almost recruitment pieces, because then you think you're going to go into the military and you're going to be like having super, you're going to be shooting guns in slow motion covered in like anamorphic flares. And, it's like this dynamic of like, you think you're going to be in a hot shit movie type thing, or it's going to have that flavoring to it. And when, of course, it's so much different than that.
Right.
I think that there are certain elements where certain movies just become very kind of mouthpieces for that. So, but yeah, it's like you said, it was funny because I did work on several productions in the system that were surprisingly, had themes in them that were surprisingly deep considering the mainstream element of them, things like the Matrix. I didn't work on the original Matrix, but I worked on the Matrix sequels and Avatar and things like that have much you kind of use allegory to tell kind of things of deeper meaning, which is, of course, now that what I'm trying to do is more of an independent filmmaker. And I think any artist is trying to do when they go their own way is to try and do things that have more depth and more substance outside of the kind of usual show business, because it's all show business from the top down over show art.
Yeah. Has it been pretty easy transition for you, or has it been difficult? I mean, I know just from us starting the podcast, we had a couple ideas about it and it started to flow, and it was surprisingly easy the way everything came together. And I heard you talking on one of your podcasts about, I think it was your guest, and this is going to happen to me all night as I'm going to think, I'm not going to remember which guest and you were talking about these things, but you were mentioning how once you hit that path or find that maybe that meaning, that deeper meaning, it just happens real easy.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I went through several things where it wasn't like one specific thing that happened where I suddenly clicked. And then as people say, you wake up and you realize something. It was just kind of a series of steps along the way.
Yeah.
But always being in kind of like a quest for the truth and, hungry for knowledge, and just kind of a sponge for substance and information, inevitably kind of leads us on these paths of growth. So I was very lucky, I wasn't indoctrinated into anything as a child, and I would always kind of question everything, and just always in search for the truth kind of leads you to be, I think, inevitably like an autodidact, which of course is just a self-taught person. And so on top of being kind of an artist and filmmaker, in recent years, I've kind of done my own kind of independent research into interesting areas of more kind of esoteric things that have led me down many rabbit holes. And that is now something that, of course, is affecting my work coming in from, big production stuff and having a skill set that's very kind of highly technical and highly specialized. Or not, I don't want to say specialized, but I'm used to these kind of like very high bars for quality level.
Yeah.
So the kind of whole dynamic now is to try and put high quality level with the resources available, which are less resources than, large budget things, but then put that into things that have more of this kind of philosophical depth and substance. That's the kind of dynamic for me anyway. But,
and you're writing some of this stuff too, right?
Yeah, I do write. I write and I co-write, and writing, coming out of a paradigm where I haven't done as much writing.
Yeah,
writing
that's kind of what I was wondering.
Man. It's like, and that's the thing, is that in order to be a really good writer, I mean, you have to read so much, right? And with technology today and the kind of rat race and the hamster wheel, it's like so little people read that much anymore. I mean, the statistics on people that buy books is very low. And then there's some other statistic that even those that buy books, the amount of people that read the book or even finish the book is really staggeringly low. So I think when you most of my kind of independent research, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that I've kind of researched, the areas I'm getting into that are, of course, affecting the work and affecting some of the information that I kind of disseminate. Like a lot of this stuff is just, it involves a lot of reading, right? And kind of a lot of self-study, because I kind of come out of I guess you could say, like kind of a liberal progressive background. And as I've kind of grown and I realized that the, kind of little Hegelian dialectic of politics doesn't really get us that many places without kind of tiny little piecemeal reform. But I've kind of come to realize that basically through research that ultimately there's kind of this system in place that is inevitably kind of screwing people.
And it's corrupt,
and it's corrupt. And we all kind of know that there's major problems that we have as a society and as a culture, and people are kind of realizing that a lot of this stuff is systematic and things can't kind of continue in the ways that they have. So as things change and evolve, it's like we have massive growing pains with them. But a lot of what I've kind of found through my own just kind of independent study has led me to conclude that kind of, people are essentially programmed into a false version of reality. And it's basically because of a false version of history that a lot of people have been fed through many different dynamics, and a false version of kind of what they're really doing here and where they ultimately really came from. So people are kind of locked into this old system. And I mean, we all know people that are at certain various levels of understanding this. And, you guys probably on this podcast are in a search for finding other areas of more interesting information. And this is I think a growth process for all of us, right? Because most people sadly kind of aren't doing much growth, and they seem to be completely content with kind of doing the business as usual, like job every day and then popping a beer and sitting on the couch. But you guys obviously are spending you might be doing that on occasional evenings, but tonight you're sitting in your basement talking to like a guest about weird shit.
Yeah, exactly. And I noticed that with even people that are open-minded about other alternate views of reality or history, even if they're open-minded, they don't always want to go there. Like it's just too comfortable, or maybe they're too content, or it scares them. Like I know, my mom, for example, she follows sort of like the mainstream politics thing, and I always talk to her about these bigger picture things, and sometimes she just says, I don't want to go there. Like, even though it might be real and she's very open-minded about it, she just doesn't want to go there. I think there's a fear that, like, okay, even if a lot of that is true, then, that the political parties don't matter. All this stuff is just distraction. It's kind of like, I think there's probably a helpless feeling or a real deep disappointment of like, there's nothing really we can do.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a disempowering trick that I can't think this kind of system that I just kind of, referred to does. It's basically like, I mean, the way that I kind of could describe this thing is that it's kind of a construct that essentially the entire industrialized first world is this kind of system that's been put in place over, a very long period of time. I guess you could call it kind of a program or a matrix, or it's basically a monetary construct, a corporate system that has essentially commoditized everything, right? It's like the natural world's commoditized. All the creatures and inhabitants of the world are commoditized. Even its inhabitants, the people, are commoditized. And this has kind of been going on for thousands of years. And if you look at every level of our culture, and and this affects countries across the board, right? It affects America, it affects you guys in Canada, it affects all of Europe. It's like the entire industrialized first world. It's all kind of the crown and Rome from many years back. And if you look at every level of it, economic, cultural, societal, legal, educational, this system has kind of its talons in all of this. And it's kind of I'd say it kind of stems from way back when, but a lot of it is kind of this Roman empirical system, right, of empire. And it seems like back in the day, it was very obvious that if you said something that the machine or the empire didn't like, they just, if we were having this conversation 150 years ago, we'd be boiled in oil. And if we were having this conversation 100 years, they'd probably still try and, hang us by the gallows or something. So what's nice about...
Crown would be a witch for sure if it was 100 years ago.
So what's nice about the time that we're living in is we're kind of going from 2-bar signal or, 1-bar signal of what you could say, we'll get into consciousness, but now we're going to kind of like 5 bars on the cell phone signal where the internet exists. There's a dissemination of information. Everybody has a ability to get out there and get to good information. And there's a lot of bad information that's flooded over the good information.
Yeah.
But kind of, regardless of where you are in the kind of political spectrum of left or right or whatever, whatever balance of I should say pro-government or pro-corporation or anti-government or anti-corporation, when you're in that kind of Hegelian dialectic, which is this kind of, problem, action, solution box of politics, it takes a growth process to kind of finally realize, and this is kind of maybe what I went through in recent times, is you kind of come to realize that this is all almost essentially one big giant thing together. It's kind of, I would almost say it's one big corruption. And the problem with it is it's basically antithetical to the human path, the natural human path of development, growth, and maybe you might even say divinity. So,
yeah. The part I struggle with is how much of it is intentional and how much of it is systematic.
Right. Well, I would actually go, the more I kind of learn, and again, I'm just kind of somebody that's done a lot of independent research on my own and used a key element of research is, of course, discernment. Discernment's a big one. Knowing what's kind of crap information, knowing what's outright propagandistic information, knowing what's just kind of woo-woo information, and kind of using your discernment to really find out what's legit and what's worth pursuing and what will lead you to, again, something that's more towards the truth. And as I kind of go on, I'm kind of starting to realize that this is a very intentional system, and I think it's a lot more by design than people have thought. And I mean, it's not like it's our fault either. It's just kind of like the culture of kind of living in what is essentially a entire industrialized first world this is across everything. I think it's just developed like this over thousands of years, and people have these kind of very short-term mindsets of profit and keeping people in these kind of low states of vibration. But this system, unfortunately, I mean, a lot of people aren't happy today, and that's it's sad to say, but a lot of people are struggling in society and culture today. And I think in this kind of time space vector of where we are in the universe, I think you guys have talked a lot about ancient civilizations and stuff, and a lot of my research has pointed towards things like precession, that the kind of mainstream business as usual history version talk about how history has been rewritten, is that we're at the highest point of our evolution or our development. And I kind of am coming to buy more and more the mindset that we're on kind of a cycle of time, and that in the past, if you go back, it's like you look at these ancient sites, you look at the pyramids, and you look at something like Göbekli Tepe, which has just completely shattered the history of what we are.
Yeah.
You look, it's like almost when we go further and further backwards, we find that we've had more sophisticated ways of doing construction and building. So that just kind of shows that societally, it seems like, I think we're coming out of a dark ages, but we're only kind of like 1 foot out of the dark ages. So this system, I think, is kind of a relic of being in those dark ages. And one thing that I think it does is it kind of tricks a lot of people into believing that they are more free than they really are.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, it penetrates everything. So it's not the problem with it is that people are not conscious that they are kind of spiritually incarcerated, right? And cultural I think one of the major problems that kind of people in today's society do is they make the mistake of thinking that some sort of cultural institution cares about them as an individual, as a person. And there's varying levels of cultural institutions that are certain, some of them are outright slimy and some of them are trying to do a good thing. But I think the classic example is somebody that's like worked on an assembly line at the factory for 30 years and thinks that is somehow going to that institution as a
somehow
whole
fulfill them or cares about them, or
has like loyalty to what's happened in the past. So this kind of again, back to the kind of like how people have varying levels of like government versus corporations. I think again, you kind of come to realize that, well, the government is just one giant corporation. It's all kind of one big corporate thing. So it's kind of a global corporatized economic model. And I think that one word that this system doesn't want people to know about is corporatized, right? Because you look around you and I think everything is essentially just very corporatized. And I mean, I use the kind of metaphor sometimes of like, when you used to drive across the United States, there'd be all these kind of small local businesses. And, you'd go into your little local mom and pop shop and you'd buy your groceries from the person that owns that shop, maybe lived above the shop. And now these days, it's like everything's become this massive mega thing. And the resources are going to much, fewer people. So it's definitely this kind of hierarchical dynamic. And, like you said, Graham, I mean, many intelligent people don't want to think or acknowledge or know that kind of a force is curbing human development as a whole. And that's kind of something that when you realize, you pretty much, you get to a state where you realize that because this system exists, a lot of things are quite backwards and upside down from what you originally thought they were.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, it's like the more monopolized it gets, the shittier it's going to get for the average person, right? The more control they have, the less fair wages are going to be. And you know what I mean? Pretty soon it's going to be there's like 40 different companies you can work for, and that's it, right? The food industry is 3 of them, and then there's 3 places to buy cars from, but they're all owned by the same person.
The problem is, whenever you talk about this with people, they all automatically want to throw you in a camp and say that you're like socialist because you talk about the monopoly of corporations.
Well, in terms of, I mean, socialism is such a funny word because anybody that's like, back kind of down into the Hegelian dialectic box, but like anybody that you hear that's kind of says this anti-socialist thing typically wants socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. That's kind of the dynamic. So it's like, where do you want your socialism in the political spectrum? There's somebody right now that's running for president in the United States named Bernie Sanders, who's a political independent in the United States. And Bernie, out of very few people in politics, I mean, I think Bernie is somebody that's authentically, genuinely trying to help people and not just be a puppet for somebody else. But, Bernie is a self-described democratic socialist. So Bernie's mindset is like, I would like to, use the social good towards the people. So it's kind of like, where do you want your socialism? Where do you want your socialism in the balance of kind of capital and social? And I think a trick is that people just throw out socialism as a blanketed negative thing when in reality it's kind of like they're happy to have socialism for billionaires.
Yeah. Speaking of that, this is hard to articulate, but obviously there's been this control system over, let's say, thousands of years even, but there's got to be this huge acceleration even over the last decade or two with actually technology and the stock market and all this. Like, we had a couple guests on. We're talking about the trillions of dollars in getting traded in derivatives. Like, that must be creating like hundreds of trillions, like not just, a few trillion here and there, but
yeah,
at the highest level, this economic game that's being played is making a lot of people very rich, like way more than even in the, 70s or 80s when they started to really change the banking system, especially here in Canada. But do you wonder, there's got to be also a new breed of these ultra elites as well. Like, and I wonder if there's a struggle at the top, or if some of these people that do make, billions and trillions off of figures in the computer, basically, if they're going to be, if there's going to be some sort of change of the guard as well. Like, I mean, there could be a chance that some enlightenment comes out of that, kind of like a sort of a conflict at the top of these financial elites, maybe. I mean, there's even the, Russia and China and Brazil creating their own banking system in some ways. And there's it seems to me like there's kind of a struggle at the top as well.
Well, it seems like, technology, a pro side of technology, I mean, again, pros and cons with everything. And a pro side of technology is it makes access to information so much better, right? And so you look at like situations going on right now. At the time we're doing this podcast, there's a lot going on with like police brutality throughout the United States. And of course, like African Americans being, very commonly target for police situations. And this is all stuff that's always gone on. It's just now technology allows us to it's making everything more transparent, and it's allowing everything to kind of come to the surface more.
Right.
And so you look at things like the stock market, where there's always been kind of, people trying to do decent things on the stock market. And then there's been a massive amount of kind of corruption on the stock market. And it's just so obvious now with kind of the old systems kind of crumbling that it's almost like, I almost want to use, I want to use the Patrick Swayze Roadhouse metaphor of like, it's got to get worse before it gets better. Right. So you see things in meltdown before the kind of like it's darkest before the dawn.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. It does feel like it's got to collapse before it can be rebuilt.
Yeah. And collapse is that's a whole 7-hour conversation with like peak oil and all that. And what I hope for moving on to better paradigms is that it's not just like zombie apocalypse. We're all fucked overnight, and we've got to, stash beans in the basement and store ammo. But it's more of a very long transitional period where, as things melt down and people are really struggling financially, it's like, well, you're forced to do more authentic things. You're forced to, know your neighbors more and work more locally and go eat at, shop at farmers markets and things like that. Stuff can't be shipped thousands of miles. So there's definitely silver linings in everything. But it's funny you mentioned the stock market, man, because you guys, some of the things that you talk about on this podcast, I mean, you've talked about orbs and you talk about UFOs and, Easter Island heads, and you've probably talked about Sasquatch a bit in there. The funny thing is that these things, when you talk about backwards and upside down, you will realize as you kind of go down a path of research, you come to realize that there's a lot more truth in some of these things than the stock market. I mean, the stock market is just an abstract creation made by man, and it has no tie to anything in nature. And so, yeah, like you said, man, it's like people make gazillions of dollars by staring at abstract numbers in this complete artificial system all day. So the thing about this system and this whole kind of overarching thing is that it's all about retracting human consciousness.
Yeah.
Right. And it's one kind of phrase that I adopted a little, I don't know, I just said it on a recent episode of the podcast, and I kind of keep coming back to it a bit, is that I think human beings are we have a lot of work to do as a species, and obviously we, especially with in terms of environmental things, but consciousness is a major element to the environmental game, because in terms of like moving on to, if we can make it to a type 1 civilization. Are you familiar with this Kardashev scale? Yeah. It's like if
Type
we can
one's like star power, right?
No, I think
I think type 1 was like where you've made it past fossil fuels, and you're in a completely kind of you're in a
solar mode,
sustainable you're in a sustainable society where you're not at the verge of destroying yourself and turning the entire planet into just this weedy lot. So it's like if a species can make it to a type 1 civilization, then the possibilities are endless, because then it's like from there on, it's like Star Trek, right? Then you can explore the stars. So I think a type 2 civilization is like the society that goes on and goes out into space. So I think we're at type 0 right now, which is basically like burning fossil fuels and trashing the planet. So I think if we can make it to type 1 without killing ourselves, the possibilities are endless. But human beings are inherently really good, fundamentally good. And the problem when you live in this system, this kind of construct, this program, is that people are turned into kind of, I guess I just say this term, childish asleep robots.
Oh yeah, it's like the fucking decline of civilization will be carried out by people just doing their jobs. Like, it's just like, hey man, it's my 9 to 5.
Well, there you go. That's the robot aspect of childish asleep robot. I use the term childish in the sense that there's this word neoteny, which is essentially childlike traits in adults. And as you kind of learn more, you kind of realize that so many people are just little kids in adult outfits, right? And a lot of it stems from not having like direct experience with things, just kind of having other people tell them stuff, and then assuming that is fact, right? Like some guy on the television who's wearing a suit tells you something and you assume it's true. Or you go into some building and somebody tells you something and you just take that and assume it's true. Nobody has their own direct experience with things. And then the kind of, yes, like you said, Darren, I mean, the robot aspect is this just kind of autopilot spinning your wheels, and then before you know it, you're dead, right? And that would be like, I've just done my 9 to 5 job every day, and maybe I've barely taken a week or 2 off a year, and it's just work. We went through billions of years of evolution, so that I could sit in this cubicle all day, right? So that's kind of, and then it's like I go to my cubicle. I'm a robot. I go to my cubicle every day, and I sit on the freeway every day, and I am a robot for this system. And again, we all have to make a living in this society, and I totally understand that. I respect that. And if you've got commitments you've made to family and things, of course, your degree of what you need to do, the balance of that is there, of course. But I think this system kind of makes it so that it falsely makes you think that you need to do the balance is totally out of whack, right?
I think that's evolving though, don't you? Like, it seems like when I look at it, it seems like 30, 40, 50 years down the road, it's like, I think the workforce is going to turn into something more. I think as things become more technologically based, I think the workforce will become more passion based. You know what I mean? There's not going to be people fucking digging ditches and stuff like that anymore, right?
Right. Well, just like robots do it.
Yeah, and I think you're already seeing that with people. I think like people who are starting to make a living off podcasts or off blogging or off, selling their trinkets that they make online and things like that. I think that's just the start of a big revolution that we're going to see over the next few decades.
Yeah, but our economy can't support that though. That's the problem.
Well, that's old paradigm though. I'd say, there's a definite argument to be had about automating stuff. And an example is like, I guess McDonald's has been able to like automate their assembly line for quite a while, and they are slowly doing it, not so overnight that it freaks people out.
Yeah.
And then you look at like the automation of, I'm all for automation if it gets rid of kind of shitty jobs that don't allow a human being to do anything remotely creative or growth based. Like if you're working at if you're a teenager and you're working at like the cell phone stand at the mall selling like rhinestone cell phone cases, I mean, that's cool. But ultimately it's like, that's a job that could be done by a vending machine. Or like, there's jobs that are like, you're a checker at the grocery store. I mean, that's great. That's cool. But then, now we're seeing this automation of like checkout line things. So it's like, I'm happy to have those things be automated if those people then aren't out of work and struggling, if they're then allowed to go off and do more interesting, creative things that allow their lives to be better. But in current paradigm, old paradigm, it's just like that person's out of a job. So I know what you mean, man.
Yeah, but that seems like that's just something we made too, right? Like fucking, we could really sort that out if we really wanted to.
No, I don't
like,
think
who
we
gives a
can.
shit about the economy?
No, because it's
Because
people, it's their
if
livelihood.
that
like,
shit's automated, then the cost of the shit should go down over time, and then it should all sort of, you know,
I don't know.
even out.
I don't think it's that. Yeah, I think our we're stuck in the system that we have for a while before that really starts to happen.
Yeah,
Like-
and that's the transition aspect,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like
That's
we
a
have
slow
to-
change.
Yeah.
Fast
Yeah.
change is fucking meltdown and then rebuild.
Fast change is zombie apocalypse.
That could
yeah.
still happen. I mean, the meltdown could still happen, though. I mean, I think we're still living in a bubble, and if it happens again, like 2008, you never know. It might get, a little worse. Occupy might be like 10 times Occupy, and who knows what'll happen.
But what about the chances of something like technology when it gets to the point where you got 3D printing and things like that are so cheap that, and maybe, some new form of energy comes along that you're not paying the hydro man anymore. You know what I mean? It seems like that could sort of sort itself out too. Like maybe we're only a few generations away from me being able to download something off the internet that I can print out on my 3D printer and fucking put it in a bucket of water in the basement, and now I have power.
Yeah, well, you probably can do that. I mean, there's this term called boxed technologies. I know you guys have talked about some of these things on the podcast before, but a boxed technology is a technology that's ahead of its time, that has been intentionally kept from development, right? So the classic example of this is a lot of the stuff that like Nikola Tesla was developing.
Yeah.
Or another one is a gentleman named Wilhelm Reich.
Yeah,
So if you look at those two guys' work, and both of those guys were light years ahead of their time.
Yeah.
Not perfect, but amazing people. You look at how they ended in the old hat paradigm. They ended with kind of really sad endings for both of those guys. But both of those guys, I really suspect, have had technology boxed, where the men in black come in and shut you down and keep shit from going into things that will move us on to better systems and better ways of doing things. And I kind of use the last thing of the kind of childish asleep robot thing is just the asleep part, where people don't realize that they're in this system that is a kind of complete abstract artificiality. And a lot of people kind of use the Matrix metaphor for that. But yeah.
That's a great example, because I've been wanting to actually dig into that a little bit deeper on a separate show is the box technology, because that's the type of thing that when you try and tell people, that's really what they just really can't wrap their heads around that. They just, it's all conspiratorial and we've never had energy that's worked or free energy or anything like that. But there is a lot of people that have been, there's story after story about people that have been, suppressed or repressed, or their labs have been burned down or broken into or whatever. And that's gone somewhere. That's being used somewhere. And you got people like, Richard Dolan talking about the secret space program and his breakaway civilization. And guys have done decades of research on that, and their conclusion is coming to like, look, this is all happening somewhere. And that's probably an explanation for a lot of the UFO sightings. And it's not, all aliens, but there's definitely somebody else flying the shit around our Earth, and that's probably where it's coming from, these box technologies. So yeah, that's a pretty important piece of the puzzle, I think.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the UFO paradigm is interesting. I mean, I'm not, I can only kind of speak of things that I've had direct experience with, and I have not ever seen a UFO with my own eyes. But some of the footage I have seen, that having a background in the background that I do, I could certainly kind of validate the authenticity of some of this footage that I've just seen online.
Yeah.
You see some stuff that you're like, okay, there's no way that is either not something that's come from somewhere else or come from some other time, or it's a technology that's existed for quite a while here, and we're not accurately given the timeline as to what the technology is. I think that there's definite technologies that exist now that we don't realize are in existence.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's exact evidence of that. But to talk about this system, not to bum anybody out. I mean, let's talk about like a way that's kind of a counter to this. And this is kind of why I have, in my kind of path, I've kind of started to kind of stumble across this philosophical path, right? And so philosophy, I mean, that kind of, if you're doing it in kind of the academic sense, I mean, we all probably had a philosophy class in university or something that was dreadfully boring.
Yeah.
It's like you were studying Nietzsche or Heidegger, or just kind of about existentialism, and it was just kind of all abstractions and just kind of Snorville or whatever. But
We shouldn't talk about that in welding school.
yeah, right. But in kind of the mainstream, again, business as usual reality tunnel, we're presented with kind of two different modalities, right? And these are kind of the two primary pillars that people come at, again, based on your political background or whatever side of the spectrum you're on, that explain, or at least attempt to explain, or do their best to explain, like the nature of reality or where we came from. And those are, of course, science and religion, right? And religion has some good aspects, but a lot of it is these days very kind of indoctrinating and dogmatic and based on certain things that are, like I said, I see whenever you drive across the United States, you see all these Jesus saves things up in various places along the roadway. And I'd love to replace all those Jesus save things with a sign that says smoke DMT.
Yeah.
Or eat these mushrooms.
Eat these mushrooms.
That should be like that should be like part of high school, man. That's how you graduate. Before you graduate, you got to take a
Heroic dose
full of mushrooms and go in the forest.
Now, well, let's talk about this. I mean, what is the difference between a sign that says Jesus saves and a sign that says smoke DMT? The difference between those two things is the Jesus saves sign wants you to look outside of yourself,
right?
To look elsewhere for something that may or may not exist, someone that may or may not exist. And the smoke DMT sign is about your own direct experience, right? So it's all about your direct experience with things. And then, we look at something like science, which has brought us like huge advancements, and has been, very beneficial to society in a lot of ways. And we certainly don't want to be anti-scientific and bring in a new era of kind of irrationality.
Right.
But a lot of science can be a bit dogmatic as well. And a lot of
totally.
scientists are on their kind of ivory tower, and science is very materialistic and reductionist. So if you ask the typical scientist to smoke DMT or eat mushrooms, they'll be like, "You're crazy," right?
Yeah.
So we have this paradigm, this dynamic, and it's kind of the creationist mindset versus the Darwinian mindset. And Carl Sagan and Cosmos did a nice thing that he did was that he brought science to people in a very kind of almost spiritual way in some aspects of that show. And a common thing that happens is that a person based on their background has a certain balance of one of these two things. If you're typically very conservative, you're oftentimes very quite religious. And if you're very, let's say, liberal, you're oftentimes purely just based on science explains everything. This is in kind of business as usual land. And a common thing is that if somebody's been completely indoctrinated into some religious system, they'll go all the way to the other side where they'll then become an atheist. So that's kind of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, I'd say. But the thing that I've kind of come to realize through my research, and this is what nobody will tell you, and you kind of have to figure out on your own, is that there's a third modality, is this basic natural path that human beings are meant to go on.
Yeah. Divine, maybe even.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the path of spiritual philosophy.
Yeah.
Which sounds kind of, again, dreadfully boring, but let's talk about it a bit. So a big important thing for me kind of as the time went on was separating spirituality from religion.
Yeah.
Because we are all very much spiritual beings. And the more you kind of have direct experiences with, let's say, mushrooms, for example, you have very spiritual experiences at times. I mean, sometimes you won't get any effect out of it, but you'll get. That's the thing about an experience like that of a plant medicine, is that this is a problem for the system because you're having a consciousness expanding direct experience that's showing you that this system is very artificial and doesn't make you want to go back to work the next day, or you have a hard time, dropping back into the pipeline of kind of screwing widgets onto wonkets. And you ask any kind of indigenous person, and they're oftentimes talk about spirits and spirituality, right? So an interesting paradigm is this paradigm of shamanism, which is, again, all about direct experience, because about experience over ideology. So in our kind of current dimension of reality, what a shaman is doing is going up and down a ladder of multi-dimensions, of spiritual dimensions, and bringing you on that ladder to have a direct experience.
Yeah.
Because when you have that direct experience, you're having a consciousness expanding experience, you're growing, you're in a growth process, and you're oftentimes bringing information back that is allowing you here to realize that things are not what they seem. Right?
Yeah. That's
So
one of the.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast actually, and it's come up more and more lately. Is the direct experience, and I love how you talk about that third modality. I was going to say the exact same thing, that it's a spiritual, it's a divine reality that's based on experience. It's just what you said, and that's why a lot of the topics we talk about, they end up being like the war on consciousness, but they end up, they end up having gravity, and they're important because a lot of it is based on people's experience, whether it's like Sasquatch, UFOs, or out of body, or lucid, like crazy lucid dreaming experiences, or near death experiences, or these all end up leading back, not all of them, but a lot of times they lead back to a spiritual center, let's say. And it's because people realize reality is not as it seems, right? And it's for some reason they all kind of lead back to that. There's a divinity in the center, but that's why we love talking about it too, because thousands and thousands of people, I joke around about Sasquatch and UFOs and people, at work or wherever in day-to-day life. And so many people have known people that have had experience, and so many people have had experience, but there's still a lot of people that still kind of just, they're not totally negative against it. They just don't believe it yet. Right. But you can't ignore the thousands and thousands and thousands of direct contact experienced by people. You just can't ignore it. I'm not saying that I know what they are or what the truth is about it, but you can't just throw it in this materialistic bucket and just say, forget about it because we can't measure it or we don't believe these people. It's just, so I find that we're not living in a matching paradigm. I find that the paradigm that we're all living in our day-to-day lives, and with most of the people and most of the people that we know have had some of these experiences, we trust them, we believe them, it doesn't match the mainstream paradigm or this paradigm that we're supposed to be living. There's a big disconnect there. And I think that middle is growing, although the ends seem to be getting polarized as well. I think there's a middle ground of people, and it's almost like a church of experience or something like that. But I'm glad you mentioned it and you're talking about it, because I think it's important. I've had things happen to me that I just know, okay, there's something going on here. This, reality is not as it seems. And and I'm open-minded to learning more about it.
Well, the thing about, you mentioned a church of experience. There's this term that I almost can't go a single podcast without bringing up, but there's this science fiction author, Theodore Sturgeon, who had this term Sturgeon's Law. Are you guys familiar with this?
I don't think I am.
It's brilliant, dude. It says that 90% of everything is crap.
Okay.
So that applies to everything. It applies to filmmaking. It applies to it applies to television. It applies to religion. It applies to cultural institutions. It applies to companies. So once you kind of sift through all the garbage, there's 10% of everything that's really good. So, you mentioned something like the church of direct experience. I would say those two things are diametrically opposed, because a church is a cultural institution.
Yeah.
And a shaman, who is in a little hut in the forest, you have an experience with a shaman, and it's your own direct experience. You don't need any cultural institution for that. You don't need to be in any massive mega structure that has, a bunch of a whole thing around it. So,
there's a sarcasm to it, to the term, though. It's kind of like what would you call it, facetious or something, right. In a way. It's
Oh, I was just going to say yes, you could be kind of, there's this, sometimes when people talk about spirituality, there can be this kind of arrogance associated with it. So I know what you mean, but on the sense of the shamans and spirit, you ask any shaman, a theme that oftentimes a shaman will say is that our whole society, and you talk about this kind of system, is needing to reconnect with spirit.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Which basically means that we need to be less materialistic.
Yeah.
We need to stop buying crap that we don't need. That doesn't make you happy anyway.
Yeah.
It's like what Tyler Durden said. This stuff just ends up owning you, and we need to, kind of be more concerned with kind of states of mind and
mindful,
relationships with people. And our relationship with nature. It's all about, instead of spending your weekend at the mall, spend your weekend hiking in nature, and you'll probably have a better time. But this, like you said, man, this kind of center path, it's a path of growth. It's a path of realization. And it's the kind of beginnings of this waking up process where you kind of realize that it's all about inner work and direct experience work. And it once you start on this path, which I think that probably I have been on for a while, I suspect that you guys are on by doing this program and talking about all the subject matter that you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Probably most of your guests are on.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, a lot of your listeners are probably on. They're kind of starting to be in this kind of more philosophical way of thinking and train of thought where they end up not wanting to plug in the 90% of regular stuff that's crap and are in a search for new things that talk about new ideas. And this kind of spiritual philosophic path, it's a path of direct experience because it's all about this experience over ideology.
Yeah.
And one thing about it is that it is a depolarizer, right? Like we talk about polarization. Are you guys familiar? Are you guys familiar with natural law, the 7 Hermetic principles?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard you talk about most of them. I mean, a lot of it ends up going back to, how you make the world. The world is mental and that type of stuff. And it is, it manifests things and, the law of, what is it? There's the law of attraction, the law of conservation. Probably there's a bunch of other ones, I think.
Yeah, that's the principle of correspondence that you're talking about, which is, yes. But basically, from my memory, it's like vibration, cause and effect, polarity, rhythm, gestation, relativity, transmutation, I think. But
the rhythm one was interesting.
Yeah, and so what these are basically is like how everything in the universe works. And one of these things that we just mentioned is polarity. And what the people in the know, which are probably, the ones running the system, they know about this stuff. And so what they're doing is they're using the law of polarity to engage the Hegelian dialectic, which is infighting amongst political things, put you down in this little dialectic box to polarize you to go to one side of a spectrum or another. So a classic example of this is when somebody is, at some political side and they're like, fuck that guy on the other side of the aisle, blah, blah, blah. And so what's happening is when you're this polarized, you're much easier to control, right? So philosophy depolarizes you and allows you to be much more in a state of balance and solidity, and you're harder to control.
Yeah, it takes the blinders off.
It takes the blinders off. Yeah. So, when you have kind of knuckleheads infighting amongst stuff, it allows you to kind of float above that. And I guess ego is an interesting one because ego is kind of a thing where when you start becoming more philosophical, you kind of realize that your ego you're not at all what you think. And ego is just kind of there's this term kind of ego dissolution or ego death, which is a part of this process, I guess you could say. But as you go down this path, life gets better and more richer. And you oftentimes will inevitably bump up against things with this old way of doing things, right? Because you're on a quest for knowledge and a quest for growth, and you don't want to go sit in your cubicle every day. So there's very few people in the old system that have a job that they really like, that they really enjoy. And again, it's all about balance. I mean, we all need to kind of make a living in this society, but when you become depolarized and more philosophical, it's like the old paradigms don't work on you anymore, right? So I don't know about you guys, but I'm becoming to the point where it's like it's impossible for me to watch any sort of mainstream television.
I was just going to use that exact example. Like I'll binge watch like really good programs, but I can't watch mainstream television. Like I've tried recently just to see what's on there, experiment, and it's really hard.
Yeah, well, there you go, Graham. You're becoming more philosophical. So this is exactly it, right? Like a television show that you may have watched 3 years ago that you're like, I can watch this. You'll go back and you'll sit down and you'll watch that. Like my wife still watches some of her shows, and a few of them I used to watch with her. And now I sit down with her and I look at it and I'm like, I can't even watch this. This is just so stupid.
Yeah.
And it's so like, it's just childish because it's appealing to this kind of childish robotness. And it's not like you're better than it, but your vibratory pattern is rising. Your consciousness is expanding. And so you guys have talked to so many people on this program about like a whole spectrum of stuff that those things don't talk about, that it's almost like you can't go back. Right?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I wanted to ask you about how you think art and creativity plays into this, like directly, because I heard your, I kind of emailed you about this, but when Darren and I were trying to get you on the show, I had heard your Palenque Norte lecture. And it was right before I was going to Las Vegas. So talk about like a kind of a, could be a a challenging place materialistically, or
Right.
that type of thing. But I went there, and I didn't drink it all while I was there. I haven't drank for quite a few years, so it wasn't like a normal Vegas trip. So, anyways, but I was listening to your lecture, and it really struck a chord with me about you're talking about art and creativity and the meaning of it and the feeling of it, and when I was in Vegas, I went to 3 shows in 3 nights there, and a couple of them affected me emotionally, like Cirque du Soleil type shows, right? They weren't actually Cirque, but very similar. And of course, that type of art is made to affect you, right? I mean, it's very, what would you say? It's very, have you been to any, Darren, lately? Cirque du Soleil?
Went to the circus on Sunday.
Oh yeah, no, that doesn't count.
Madison got
That's
to ride
like-
an elephant.
That's like animal cruelty, buddy. That's way off.
There was
way
protesters.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, that's an example of something that is
Yeah.
the circus is there to make money, and that's
Yeah.
their primary goal is to make money. And
Yeah.
the welfare of the elephants at the circus is not the primary goal of the circus.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the system, that's putting its profits, its short-term mindset before the well-being of, its inhabitants, of, all of its living creatures. And so I know what you mean, man. I mean, something like Cirque du Soleil, where it's like, this is the balance of the kind of how you make money versus how you create something authentic. And everybody, this has, I think, been the struggle as old as time, right? Where, you were commissioned by the church to paint something, and they wanted you to do something, and you wanted to do something, and you had to take the money to actually live and to eat and to pay your rent. And so that's the kind of struggle. And that is something that I think anybody that's going through, oh, I'm in my job, I don't like my job, I want to be a musician, I'm playing music on the weekends, how can I make the leap from my day job to making money off my music?
Yeah, yeah.
And that is the struggle. And I think that's because we are in this paradigm where, everything's about kind of, I mean, like Napoleon Hill, who wrote this book, Think or Grow Rich, he had a great saying in the book where it's not like money is the root of all evil. It's just kind of the love of money that's all evil. So money, and it depends on how the intent is put into money.
Yeah.
But-
What year did he write that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing, is that you're not going to last very long in the current construct without struggle if you're not making money
Yeah.
on your art,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
the struggle.
Yeah,
So it's like,
exactly.
how do you balance your day life between making money and paying the bills versus doing your kind of creative ventures? Because I do talk about this on the podcast a bit. It's like, I think we all are inherently creative, and it's like we all have inherent creative outlets. And anybody that doesn't think they're creative, I think they've had that smashed out of them by the system.
Yeah.
And you look at the reference of like any little kid that is just done, I mean, not every little kid likes to draw or paint, but it's like there's a lot of innocence and youth, and a lot of things that you see as a little person before you get things indoctrinated into you or pumped into you. And so that's an example of one thing where it's like, yes, the struggle of all of us being kind of creative as little people, and then you end up going to college or university, and you get that smashed out of you. So that is definitely a struggle, man. And yes, I did talk about that in that lecture quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, so it took me off guard a little bit, because I had your podcast on my mind, right? And it was interesting because we haven't really touched on the depth of creativity and sort of like the artist way too much in the show. And so I was watching these 2 sort of Cirque du Soleil type shows, and it's absolutely beautiful, right? Like 2 muscular guys doing this balancing act, like just stuff that, and the music and everything put together made it just very, very emotional, right? Like brings a tear to your eye type thing.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the perfectly chiseled guys bouncing off each other, because I'm not into that, but there was a one with a couple swinging on a rope, like it's very like romantic and all, like it gets you pretty deep, right? And then what caught me off guard is I was at the Elton John concert, and there was something about the drummer. Darren's just giggling over here, and I'm not even an Elton John fan, but I mean, I know all his music, right? So I'm not, just there enjoying the show. I took my girlfriend because she really wanted to go, and the drummer, this older drummer, made such an impression on me. Like I totally started bawling. Like there was something he did in one of his little drum solos that was so perfect and so incredible that I just lost it. Like, it was the weirdest thing. And it just really hit me, like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, he had such a perfect artistry going with these big 3 drum sets, and the way he would hit the tambourine and just keep everything going. Like, it was absolutely the most perfect performance I've ever seen. And it just totally struck a chord with me. So I don't know what I'm trying to get at, just that I realized the depth of emotion that pure art and creativity can bring.
Well, here's the thing with that. I mean, you talk about kind of commercialism, and this, I'm somebody that, again, I've had a foot in this system. I'm kind of realizing it, growing with it, or growing out of it, I would hope. And I still have, I've got one foot out of it, one foot still in it. And my foot that was still in it was I worked in the commercial industry in Los Angeles. And so it's like, that's a way that you make art that is selling stuff that's usually crap, but it's a way that you are creating artwork that then is something you're actually getting paid for. So it's like you find ways within the current paradigm, as we hopefully move on to better things, where it'd be wonderful if we lived in a world where you could, do these philosophical things and do your creative projects all day, and you wouldn't have to worry about paying the bills. But that's we're still in a system that keeps you on this treadmill and this hamster wheel where you have to always worry about, or you have to think that you're always worried. You're tricked into giving away your consent to think that you need to do these things. But in terms of like what you're saying with that, man, it's like, I mean, you talk about the corporatization of things. When things are so corporatized, so few people have all the resources that you look at something like a musician. I mean, there are millions of artists out there that are trying to make money off their music. And there's delivery systems now with, direct to listener dynamics on the internet. That's the pro side of technology for getting your stuff out there. Didn't used to be like that. You used to had to go through the gatekeepers. The gatekeepers are being bypassed. But there's millions of people trying to make money off their music. And you hear the same 50 people all the time on like the radio. Through the old dynamics. So it's like, that is the thing where it's like that in Hollywood too. You see the same 50 faces all the time. Only the same 50 people get, mega opportunities in that old paradigm way of doing things. And so that's totally like, that just shows how kind of grossly consolidated it is. There's a playlist of music that I've been downloading for years called the Blalock's Indie Rock Playlist. I think the website is like birp.fm or something. And these playlists have new artists every month. It's a torrent file. It's like a non-naughty torrent file that you can download. And there's like 100 songs by artists. And like half of them are incredible. And you've never heard of any of them. And they're probably all struggling to make money off their music because we're coming out of this old system. And so it's like, then those are things that exist and now we can have access to. And hopefully as time goes forward with like, yes, these new ways of doing things, we can deliver our content directly to people and hopefully make a living off of it, or at least, move on to better things while still being creative. So,
seems like it's starting, like things like YouTube and even podcasts. Like, I think it's almost like podcasts are probably leading the way in that regard of taking over radio.
New media.
As far as new media goes, but I don't think YouTube's far behind. Like, there's a ton of YouTube only shows that are getting, millions and billions of hits. Like, what is that Young Turks or whatever? They're doing tons. And you got podcasts like Rogan that are getting millions and millions of downloads, and No Agenda. And it's just, it seems like that's another way that the internet will kind of help starting to eke us forward. It seems like music's a tough one, though.
Yeah, it is.
It's so easy it's like the only way it can work. I think micropayments can somehow help with that too someday down the road. Like if people can, pay a couple of fractions of a cent or something like that over, as opposed to having to buy albums or.
That's probably going to start happening.
Well, this is the thing with this setup, this kind of construct, the matrix, is that you have to. It tells people that you either have to get with the program, which is normal, which is what the society expects, or you have to go your own way and struggle, right? So it's either like the path of normality, the path of like business as usual, or the path of one. And that path is a hard path because it requires going out into open water and you don't know when you're going to hit land next. So most people aren't willing to do that because it's like most people aren't going to quit their job to pursue some sort of creative venture in this dynamic because it's hard to do and you don't know if it's going to pay off, right? It could have huge payoffs or you could crash and burn. The thing about it also is that, you can talk about philosophy till the cows come home, but how do you apply philosophy to your real life? If you're doing it in some sort of like academic institution or something, that's, I don't want to just say boring, but a lot of the times when, you have a philosophy class or something, that's just kind of talked about in the abstract and it's not really talking about how you can actually apply it. A spiritual philosophic path, because again, we are all spiritual beings, is kind of a wormhole that opens you up to all sorts of things. So a lot of the stuff that you guys talk about, just like you said, Graham, with out of body experiences or like neuro linguistic, programming or all this kind of weird esoteric shit. A lot of this is all about, it's all like delivery systems to get us to similar places. And that's to realize this kind of spiritual element of us. And it's hard because people aren't willing to do, I'm just probably on the very early steps of this. And I know that through time, the machine has tried to kind of crush this spiritual development out of people because it makes you a lot harder to control. And it makes you, you're kind of inoculated against, I basically it's like you can't even, again, old things don't work on you. So you grow out of this whole system of kind of repression and being crushed. So the further you go down this path, it will ultimately lead you more towards esoteric things.
Yeah, I wanna at some point here get into how virtual reality will either help us get there or hinder us. But I also want to talk. I also want to talk about at some point too, because you've been to Burning Man as well, right? Once, I think.
I went once.
And I kind of wanted to talk to you about that as well because that's something that we haven't really talked about a lot here. Is that whole culture of the sort of the festival culture and it sounds pretty fascinating. Like it sounds like you have a lot of conversations like this with people attending those. So I don't know where you want to go first with that, but
no. Well, it's interesting because the virtual reality is a weird one because like Silicon Valley and Hollywood are going bonkers at the time that we're doing this podcast over virtual reality. And there's new technologies with virtual reality. There's several different technologies coming about. One being this Oculus, this other being this Google Venture Magic Leap that are basically like these new ways of doing what is essentially an experience where you put on a headset and you have this kind of like, it's all stereo 3D and you have this virtual reality experience. And I did this talk at Palenque Norte that was about visualizing, using artificial ways to visualize what you see in a psychedelic experience. And the kind of gist of the talk was how unbelievably impossible that is right now. And you talk about something like a stereo 3D headset. All of this stuff I've come to realize is like the 99-cent store of taking LSD. So because you go back to something that's like a psychedelic experience, which is your own direct experience, and this is a paradigm that the machine had to crush in the 60s because people were having these dropping acid in Golden Gate Park, having expansive consciousness expanding experiences, which this spiritual philosophic path is. It's an expansion of your consciousness, and they've always tried to crush this. That type of stuff with basically what's happening now with technology is we're repeating with our technology what we have inherently been able to do with our plant technologies. You look at something like the cloud, right, which is essentially like you upload your files somewhere. That is essentially just like the Akashic records, right?
Yeah.
We're repeating things that already have existed.
Yeah.
So I use the kind of metaphor of like when you have a mind-blowing psychedelic experience, and not to get specific with tech, but some of my most profound experiences have been like unbelievable resolution, unbelievable color spectrum, undescribable frame rate. And you look at something, you put an Oculus Rift on right now, and it's like the super crude version of that people are going bonkers over.
Yeah.
But we're getting to this point where we're kind of starting to repeat these things that we inherently are able to do ourselves. But the machine doesn't want you to know that you can do, because you're going to be having an expansion experience and then you're going to be coming back realizing like, this is bullshit. So it's funny because it's like it's being sanctioned now, where it's like we're allowed to have an experience that we haven't always inherently been able to have, but they haven't let us have one way, but we're having it in the kind of the technological way that's much more controlled, I guess you could say.
Yeah. We were talking about it with some of our
because like the optics are okay, but it's some of the feelings, you know what I mean? Like there's some of the emotions tied with the psychedelic experience that'll never be recreatable.
Yes. Well,
no, I think they can be. Like if the VR experience is good enough and it's developed in that way, I think it could be repeated.
I don't think so, man. I don't think that could be programmed.
But you don't get ASTMR or that. What's that that acronym for that brain orgasm that I get when I'm listening to some certain music or something like that?
You're listening to music with chiseled dudes.
No, but I think that the VR experience could do that. Like my sister works for Cloudhead Games, and they are developing sort of like what's the name of that old video game called is it Myst? Myst, yeah. It's like that type of thing, but it's super, like you're talking about, really good resolution. They've won sound awards already, like really good sound. I mean, if you can be immersed in that environment, it can affect you physically. And if it can affect you physically, then that can trigger all kinds of, I don't know, like spiritual awakening experiences, I think, especially if it's not about shooting and killing in the game. But anyways, I wanted to mention the technology they're using too is Vive, it's called. It's like a Oculus's competitor, I guess, from Valve. I don't know if you've heard of Valve, the game company. I'm not a gamer, so this is all like totally new to me. And they have this lighthouse technology. So basically, it can be played within a room. So you're walking around, and it actually judges where you are in the room. So it's a completely new technology for interacting in that environment.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just kind of like it's a way to submerge yourself in something that could be distraction or could be a very positive reality tunnel experience. It's all based on the stories and the content that are created. So the virtual reality is just kind of a tool to get you there. But the thing about, like, Darren's saying, it's all about feeling your experience if you're having some sort of, and let's say for those that aren't familiar, I mean, shamanism is basically a practice where you are guided through an experience where you take a plant medicine, and it could be any plant medicine. I mean, I think from my knowledge, any psychedelic or plant medicine can be shamanized. So the shaman is guiding you through an experience after you take the medicine that then is allowing you to have, hopefully, if done properly with, proper respect and setting, have a huge expansive experience, and then bring information back that allows you to hopefully cure something or better yourself. And the virtual reality version of that is like the 99-cent store version currently, but it will get much better. But I think there will always be a separation between the inherent like realness of a true experience that you've had with something that's of kind of the guy and mother, a plant, versus something that's just kind of a sterile hardware technology. So I think it's all about, if you're using these kind of virtual spaces in the future as kind of stepping stones to maybe more authentic plant experiences, that'd be interesting. I'd love to see, more cultural acceptance into, obviously, as hopefully the old systems kind of continue their slow meltdown and we move on to better systems, hopefully. And there's a lot of work to be done with that. And I think a major part, as I've talked about, is everybody doing the inner work on themselves of this kind of inner philosophical work and growth, and just always being willing to expand and learn and question everything and be like kind of in a quest for knowledge. And again, nothing's off the table. Then, as people do more of that, then people will create of more substance that then, virtual reality experience can go in and teach you things that are maybe not quite as profound, but somewhere on the same ballpark one day. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but maybe one day, sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. Remember we were talking with who were we talking with, Darren? I can't remember now, but about, we were talking about VR and I was mentioning this kind of side of it. And they were like, no, it's going to be like, take us just deeper into the materialistic aspect of things. But I think you're right. It could be both. I think it could be either. I mean, we're getting to the point now where they've already got, like, it hasn't even really come out commercially available, and they've got full body tracking now and a full-on HD immersive environment. Like, it's not far from giving you a pretty damn crazy experience.
Yeah, and the downside of that is that most of it's used to go back to like Hollywood, where it's just like there's zombies, bring in the military.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
instead, it's like we're in Oculus space, and
Yeah,
there's
you're
zombies
right.
in the military, and that's the depth of the substance. It's all baby pool in terms of the actual substance.
No,
of
you're
what,
right. I mean, I bet you 90% of it's going to be fucking first person shooter games and shit like that.
Yeah, and that's fun, and I'm all for that.
No,
and
no, no. Maybe 10%, 80% porn.
80% porn. Well, again, back to Sturgeon's law. 90% of it will be crap, but 10% of it will be really great. And I had somebody on the podcast who's an interesting gentleman named Genova Chen, and Genova has a game company in LA, and everything he's ever done has been kind of more conscious subject matter.
Right.
And I
right.
wanted to talk to him about that because he's not doing like zillions of bullets spraying while things are moving in slow motion and stuff's covered in lens flares. He's doing this kind of really beautiful stuff that's basically the opposite end of the spectrum, and it's much more kind of conscious stuff. And it's almost like his work has this kind of shamanistic feel to it, where it's like have this beautiful experience. This can be had in a virtual reality space, but it's all about the subject matter, right? And then I agree that yes, a lot of it will be porn.
What did I watched a special the other day on some, it was like, I don't know, David Attenborough was a narrator though. I remember that. And it was like this shot, they tried to recreate this like time lapse of this little camera pan through the forest, but it was like spaced out over the entire growing season.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like it was crazy. I was pretty blown away.
Was it the rainforest or something like that? Or
it was like the camera pan and it was showing all the things, but they couldn't keep the gear outside, so they like built this trolley and copied it all and then made it all in a studio, and it was fucking crazy. It was pretty moving actually, about the work they put in.
Did you shed a tear?
I did not shed a tear.
No, I probably would have. Fucking sensitive guy.
Yeah, and you know what's going to be happening.
If the Flames win the cup, I might shed a tear.
I mean, before we know it, what's going to be happening is kids. I mean, maybe a downside of technology. This is, mostly con, maybe a little bit of pro. Is that you'll have some sort of David Attenborough narrative nature program that you're having with a virtual reality experience, and the kid is like wandering through nature with his VR helmet on instead of actually going outside.
Yeah, totally. No, totally. That's going to happen. I mean, the travel will be huge.
Right.
Tourism and travel. I've got one that I don't know if this is good or bad, but I want mine hooked up to my stationary bike, and I could just bike all around the world sitting in my basement.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to happen.
Again, pros and cons with technology. I think it's also about moderation and realizing that there's things that can be done here that are very beneficial to people. And if that allows you to, if you are never able to see the Great Wall of China unless it's through a VR experience, and it's done in amazing, again, perfect frame rate, perfect resolution, like everything's exactly as it would be if you were actually there, then that could be a good thing.
Except there's zombies and you can shoot the shit out of them.
See, I admire the Cloudhead games because we had Denny on that, and it was great talking about VR and all that. And he's really trying to, and actually they're doing it. They're doing the conscious subject matter as well. Like they wanted to provide a full immersive experience without they're not going to be into the shooting and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully it does well.
Problem solving. That's what
it's a lot of problem solving. It's a real interactive game like that. So.
Yeah.
No jump scares. She says.
What's a what?
A jump scare? That's when
Was that like when I jumped off the building in the Oculus?
No, I don't think so.
And you had to fly through shit while you were falling?
No, I think a jump scare would be like a zombie jumping out and scaring you. Like there's gonna be I think there's gonna be a lot of heart attacks in VR. It's pretty realistic.
Right, exactly.
We're going to get to a point where that's going to become a problem, where the games will be so crazy that people will be fucking dying.
Yeah, well, if
you die in the game, do you die in real life?
Fuck yeah.
Ignorance is bliss. But if we're hooked up to machines more and more in the future, I mean, that's something that, again, if you're able to do things there that you otherwise would never be able to have the experience of, fair enough. But if you can always have the real experience, have the real experience.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I would champion with that type of thing.
Yeah.
But it is certainly exciting times. I mean, think of how much technology has just changed in our lifetimes. I mean, you hear the statistics on somebody that's like 17 right now has no idea what like a CD is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like somebody that's 20 never had an audio tape. It's just staggering.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I still have my old audio tapes.
You
You have
do,
your cassette collection?
Yeah. You should see it one day. I should show you. You'll get a kick out of it. I probably got like 200 old cassette tapes.
I used to have I had cassettes.
Did you
I
really?
remember
No.
I had Use
Yeah,
Your
you were
Illusion.
living in a small town. Oh, that was probably
Use Your
yeah.
Illusion 1 and 2 on
Yeah,
cassette.
Yeah. I had those on cassette too. So, speaking of experience, what do you do personally? Like, how do you, besides attending events like Burning Man, do you have like a regular meditation practice, or do you do anything personally?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I have some friends that have been doing Kundalini yoga lately. And if you
Yeah.
want to talk about a kind of an esoteric art, man, I mean, there are yogis in India that have been getting to very kind of expansive places just by doing yoga every day.
Yeah.
So however you want to get there, I mean, whether it's through meditation or yoga, I mean, you don't have to do a plant medicine to get there. But I have had a little bit of experience with that. It's funny, my parents took me to like a meditation class when I was like 12 years old, and when they were trying it. And of course they eventually they tried it for a while and they brought me to the class, and we all kind of waned off of it just because I think it's quite boring. But there's ways of doing micro meditations and things where you don't have to sacrifice so much of your time. Again, the machine keeps us on these big busy hamster wheels where we have very little time. But I would be interested in getting back into some of those mind, like short term, everyday consistent practice yoga techniques. But for me, I mean, I just try and, as you become more conscious, I mean, you really kind of pay attention to what you put in your body, and the effect of your health on your in terms of your mental health and your physical health.
Yeah.
So I've just always tried to stay in good like physical shape, and then work on mental health as well. But like so much of what I've done these days is just reading weird things, and things that I think to most people are considered just like not mainstream at all. But as you grow through your path, I mean, you read something like the Tao Te Ching, where you read it when you're in high school, and it's the most boring, unnerving thing you could imagine. And then you might go back and read it in 5 years, and you get a little bit out of it, right? And then maybe you go back and you read it 10 more years later, and you're like, wait, there's some interesting stuff in this. I'm expanding my horizons. I'm now seeing more into this. And then maybe later in life, if you are continuously on a growth path, you'll read it and you'll be like, this is just amazing. This is full of gnosis. This is incredible. So I'm trying to read more really deep things of substance, which helps me be a better writer too. So it's a lot of kind of personal research. But I haven't had a lot of experience with festival culture. I mean, and festivals it's becoming more popular. And the kind of couple festivals that I've been to, I've been really impressed with just the level of general conversation that you can have there, and just the kind of level of knowledge that people have, and just kind of, there's definitely a dynamic with festival culture where a certain type of person comes at it, and you'll get everything. You'll get kind of the new age ridiculousness, or the kind of like people that don't know anything, or then you've got kind of the psychedelic community there. It's kind of a whole smorgasbord of people that are just there for recreational purposes, or there for deeper purposes, and people use it as many different reasons.
Right.
But yeah, festivals certainly are a participation in that is something that can be a direct experience of getting there, getting out there, and actually having, there certain things can happen at those places that you won't see anywhere else. I'm not by any means an expert on festival culture, and I can really only kind of talk about what I've had direct experience with. And I've been to a couple of them, but it's interesting seeing those things on the rise for sure. I think internationally there's a lot of festival things happening constantly, and you'll definitely find a certain type of person at festivals.
So you'll continue doing that a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. It wouldn't be like every single year type thing. I mean, there's people that revolve. I mean, let's look at something for like Burning Man, for example, that I went to one year, and I was just, one of the things that was amazing to me was how certain people at Burning Man, their whole lives revolve around that event for the year.
Yeah.
It's like they're like got it on the calendar. That's like the week where they're going to just let it all out, literally sometimes. And like that's like their whole year is revolved around that. And they have these names and these personas. It's kind of like their LARPing. It's like their spiritual LARPing festival for that part of the year. They just build their whole life around that. So, some people are really into festival culture.
For those of us that don't know what LARPing is, they get live action role playing, right?
Right. Yes, I should have mentioned. Yes,
No,
exactly.
no, it's I heard you talk about it on your podcast. I love that because I grew up in the '80s and we played Dungeons and Dragons, and it was like fantastic for creativity. Like it was really interesting how
never.
we'd stay up all night, like doing actual role playing games and all that. It would get pretty crazy.
I could never
Right.
get into that shit, man. I remember we tried to play Dungeons and Dragons one time, and I didn't really know what it was, and I was like, "Oh yeah, cool." And I went over there, and we were sitting around, and then they
Just like,
started. I was like, "Yeah,
I'm out of here.
I'm out of here."
I loved it.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of like nerd tax associated with that, where of course everybody views you societally as some sort of status of being a nerd when you do those things. But it's all about finding your tribe, right? So
Oh yeah.
somebody that may be LARPing on the weekend, I mean, maybe they're a computer programmer by day and they're a weekend LARPer and they're dressing up as like Gandalf charging the field. They've got friends that they're doing that with. So.
Yeah. No, I mean I grew up in a pretty open like circle of friends. And all. Like I was friends with and did all kinds of different things from sports to that type of stuff and music. Like we were into all kinds of things with all different groups of people. It was pretty cool. Like you had your little cliques, but there was also
Clique?
cliques of people. Cliques.
Clique, yeah, maybe that's the Canadian word of
No, it's not.
Uh,
Maybe the French Canadian.
Yeah, maybe.
that's funny. Well, there was a documentary made about LARPing. This is a total random conversation.
I've never heard of LARPing before. I don't.
You really never had. There was a documentary made about LARPing a while back, and I know the filmmaker. One of the main things that he struggled with making it was the community of LARPers allowing him to come in and kind of be exposed to their inner world because they were very afraid that they'd be made fun of. It was like the kind of geeks of Comic-Con, right? And again, not Comic-Con's a geek, but like back to kind of neoteny and childishness. I'm always amazed by how many people are willing to go, full-grown adults that are willing to go to Comic-Con and dress up as like Mr. Incredible and wear tights all weekend.
Oh, the other day I was stuck in traffic downtown because there was a whack of people dressed up when Comic-Con was here. There was just, I couldn't believe it. It was like 4 lights and the cops were there. They're just like, no, let them through. So we're just sitting there and it was just like costume.
Well, I know we wanted to go.
Costume.
I wanted to have a booth there for the Grimerica show. I wanted to go and sell some T-shirts or something like that. But
hundreds of people with costumes.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think about that as being an artist? Like, do you find that, it sounded like you were going to say that was sort of childish, but in another way, it's kind of very creative as well.
And, in terms of childishness, I mean, when it comes to certain things where it's the separation between, I would say, kind of simple ignorance and complex ignorance, where like, a child is, when a child's born, he doesn't know like kind of what quadratic equations are, of course, but when that's simple ignorance, but the complex ignorance is like, I don't want to know any more about things that I'm looking at. And, we all probably have family members that are like, you're looking too much at crop circles. I don't want you to, I don't want to even think more about crop circles. Right. And that's complex ignorance. It's like, I'm not even willing to look anymore at this. So I think in terms of just like people wearing funny outfits, of course, it's nice to have a nice kind of escape at times. But and that kind of childishness of like, let's dress up for Halloween, even though we're adults. It's Halloween this week, even though we're adults and we want to return to that kind of innocence of youth. Cool. That's great. But when you're doing these kind of childish things at a societal level, I think that's when we disavow what we're doing here. And then we let this whole system is kind of taken over because we have so much inner work to do. And we're all at kind of various stages of that. Yeah, I'm all for people dressing up in tights if they want to. Yeah.
Shout out to my hairdresser who makes her own Comic-Con costumes. She's got like 5 of them going on. I've been talking to her about it. It's pretty cool.
It takes some balls for sure. Like, you know what I mean? You have to have.
Why you're dressed up?
I don't know. You have to have a decent, but you can't be too self-conscious to go be walking around in public dressed up.
Well, you got masks on and stuff. Like, it's not like you're naked.
Well, and there's a certain like.
I wouldn't do it. Like, you know what I mean? I'd be too self-conscious to dress up as Superman and head downtown and parade around.
I was Frodo for Halloween.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Is that
with my cat. I had my cat's hair on my feet. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a certain like method acting aspect to it as well, and this applies to festival culture. Where I don't know if it's like this for every festival, but at some festivals, people basically take on a character and they embody that character for the week.
That's
right?
crazy. I didn't really realize that.
Yeah, and like the method actor will do, they get into character and they essentially never leave character until, for an extended period of time. And like, somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis, for example, who is a method actor, his wife says that it's very interesting, like living with him as he's in character for weeks at a time. And so I know at Comic-Con, it's like a lot of people get so into their characters, yeah, that they build their own costumes and then they embody that character for extended period of time. And I think that's an element of people working to kind of have micro escapes from the kind of hamster wheel of this kind of system that is quite grinding. And yeah, go ahead.
Is that Chavez, Daniel Day-Lewis? Chavez from Young Guns, the Indian dude?
No, Daniel Day-Lewis is, he's
The
Daniel
Gangs of New
Day-Lewis.
York, wasn't he? Or-
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. I was just picturing
I
like
think I've always-
Chavez storming around the house at home.
Didn't you mention? I think you mentioned Young Guns on a previous episode too. Like,
Oh yeah, I'm a huge Young Guns fan.
Really?
When I was
Oh
a
my
kid, I
God.
had the 2 VHSs, Young Guns 1 and 2. I used to just watch them over and over, probably a couple times a year.
right.
Billy the Kid, man, I wanted to be Billy the Kid.
Well,
Wow.
you look at somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis.
Lou
who's-
Diamond Phillips, you're thinking
That's
of.
what
Yeah.
I'm thinking of.
Lou-
Yeah.
Like Daniel Day-Lewis is an actor and a very, amazing actor. He's arguably one of the best actors that's, lived in recent times. And, not to put hierarchy on it or anything like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But somebody like that is an artist, right? He's a true artist. And you don't see him doing like Pepsi Cola commercials all the time. He's found a way to do his artwork with as much substance and solidity as possible without kind of doing this, what people call the selling out paradigm, which is kind of like selling to the highest bidder of this kind of construct, this system. So, one thing that's really interesting that I learned about recently is that apparently a lot of actors have things where they will do a commercial, which is arguably like a sellout thing, and they'll make it so that the contract says that it's only in Asia or it's only in Japan. So
Wow.
Americans don't know that they've done this whiskey commercial.
No way.
Yeah. So it's like they have it both ways where they'll take the money, but then they don't want to be all over they don't want to be blasted all over Taco Bell ads all over Los Angeles.
Is
So
that
instead
is that
they'll-
the selling out paradigm then?
Well, that's what arguably people would say.
Right. Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
like back to musicians, it's like, how do you make a living doing your music without kind of, and how do you make money off of that without, completely sacrificing your art, right? It's like, how do you put out a good album every time without somebody in an old way of doing things wanting you to just put out something that's going to be a money making thing that the art suffers for it because of, the schedule you were required to put it out, or somebody you had too many cooks in the kitchen demanding something and it wasn't coming from the true spirit of what the actual substance of the music was trying to be. So it's always a struggle.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one because there was so few people making, millions and millions as musicians, and now it's kind of they're not. I don't think they can make that much anymore, and it's kind of has spread out quite a bit, right?
And now
Yeah.
Apple gets most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it would be nice, as we all work to hopefully move on to better things, it'd be nice if like not 50 musicians were making a gazillion dollars, but millions of musicians were all making a living wage off their music. That'd
That's
be
kind of what
amazing.
I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. Well, we've talked about a whole range of things. We talked about LARPing. We've talked about spiritual philosophy. We've talked. See, the range of conversation is great, and that's what I think we were talking about this before we started the show. It's like it's nice when you have kind of a casual conversation where anything's on the table, because then it makes it for like less kind of starchy, formal conversation where you can go down any path, and it oftentimes ends up leading to interesting things that you realize certain things are connected to other things, and nothing's off the table.
I still like the method actor. Who else is a method actor? It's fun to picture them in their regular life.
Yeah, Jim Carrey is a method actor.
Really?
Yeah. So like, for example, I think when you're a method actor, basically like you go into character and it's hard to stop your character, right? So like usually when you're an actor and let's say you're in a play or you're on a set, you're on a film stage, they're rolling camera and then they're calling cut and you're just going back to being, your normal person. A method actor won't do that. They'll stay in character. Like cameras will be not even pointed at you and you'll be sitting in, Video Village, which is where they review all the footage as they're shooting for the day. And you will be in your serial killer character just sitting there. And sometimes like method actors can be very difficult to deal with because you'll get amazing, incredible performances out of them because they never go in and out. They're always going deep and staying in the deep end of the
Yeah,
pool.
but if their character's a dick, then look out, right?
Yeah, like, can you
Exactly.
imagine? I think
Exactly.
that's like Chris Tucker from Rush Hour. I couldn't handle being around that guy all the time. I think he's just like that maybe all the time because he was like that in Friday too.
He's not a method actor. Well,
That's like my own personal hell. Is one day I just wake up and everybody's Chris Tucker, little kid Chris Tuckers.
well, that's a problem with a lot of comedians. Is comedians are I have so much respect for the comedian, and I've learned so much from comedians through time. I mean, the amount of stuff I've learned from stand-up comedy in terms of life and in terms of like things that have allowed me to explore and go down interesting paths is staggering. But the problem with a lot of comedians is that they then get roles in other areas and they're not acting, they're just a personality. So they're hired to just essentially be themselves in a movie, right? So you get an actor, just like you said, Darren, where he's just the same person in every movie because he's not acting, he's just the personality that he really is. So you look at some actor that's just kind of the same in every role. You're not going to last very long because you're not in a growth process. You're just stagnating. So,
Or you become the governor.
Interesting.
yeah.
So what are you working on now then besides the podcast and stuff? Are you got any more short films coming up?
Well, actually, it's funny you mentioned because I've been working on a project for the last couple of years where now that I'm kind of starting to dive into the realm of documentary filmmaking because
right. Yeah, I wanted to ask you.
So much more of kind of a conscious form of filmmaking.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to figure out a way to make something that's of substance that is a cinematic thing that I can do with the kind of resources at hand. And, movies take so much time and effort to make. And I'm working on a first feature, which is very similar to what we've talked about this evening, which is kind of about this kind of spiritual philosophic path. And I'm working on it with a gentleman that's an amazing human being who's probably one of the best people in the world at describing this stuff to people. And so I've kind of teamed up with him, and his substance is really deep and amazing. And then I'm bringing kind of my production values into it, having been in Hollywood and having worked at these companies that have these very high bars for quality level. So that's a project that hopefully we're aiming to have done next year, and it's called Transmutation. And transmutation is an alchemical word that basically is the changing of one state from another. And, like an alchemists were kind of an ancient, I don't want to say chemists, but they changed materials. A lot of it is using your will and your consciousness to change a material from one state to another. There was actual alchemy done in a lab that transmuted one material from another, or you can transmute yourself from your old self to your new self.
Yeah.
So we're calling the film Transmutation because it's about this kind of like going from a path of like the societal path to going from a path of this like your own journey and why we are here and what we're here for.
That's interesting. Somebody had a podcast recently, a whole podcast. Who was talking about it? Maybe Alex Sakaris or somebody, and one of their guests does a podcast and it's all about people who have sort of gone through this awakening or transmutation. Like it's one story after another of those people.
Yeah. And I'd say that, there's several reasons why this is happening now. Again, I use kind of the cell phone metaphor of like we're going from 2 bars to 5 bars. And I think one major reason is because of the internet and how easy it is to access information. And you look at something like this podcast where anybody can get to this podcast now as long as they can find it and get exposed to a whole slurry of new information. I mean, this is just kind of like how something like Coast to Coast was, where they talk about, a bunch of interesting things and some weird things and some unusual things, but you get much more of a broad spectrum. And then, that allows for so much more interesting abilities to expand. That's kind of, a major part of what's, I think, an important thing to do. And this project is kind of a way I've used the podcast that I have as kind of a research tool for a lot of projects where it's like some of the people that have been on the podcast and the podcast I do is very tertiary. It's not by any means kind of my primary thing, but it's kind of like a side research project where it's like, oh, I am interested in this person. Like I'd love to chat with them. And then also a lot of it is like people that I'm kind of ended up collaborating with on projects. So I have several projects kind of I have various, the line that they want you to always say in Hollywood is, I have various projects in multiple stages of development.
that's awesome.
Yeah, some of the projects are with people that I've had on the podcast. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. My sister's saying you should do a documentary on VR and how it can affect people.
Yeah.
And then she says, you don't have to say this. Don't say I just thinking. Oh, that's funny. But about the transmutation thing, I believe that there's also a metaphysical thing going on too with the collective consciousness. Like we're picking up on something that's going on. And I remember it's kind of like Rupert Sheldrake's work on the morphic resonance and stuff like that, or the morphic field. I think that there's some evidence pointing that that's type of stuff is possible. And I think that's playing a role here as well.
Yeah, and that's what I realized I was going to say is that there's multiple reasons why this is happening. I mean, one is the internet, and another reason is like I think there's also astrological reasons why people are kind of, this is the time when we're going from, arguably the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. And I think we're getting signals now that are saying like, it's time to wake up, species. You're coming out of the dark ages, and our evolution isn't necessarily just a physical evolution, even though you look at things like video games and look at how much different they were 30 years ago. I mean, that just right there shows that we're evolving, but it's more of an evolution in consciousness. So as people kind of nodes on the network switch on, we're all becoming a little bit more conscious, and it takes one step at a time. But I think as people turn off their, rubbish television sets, and again, there's some good shows on TV, but most of them are crap. But like, as we turn off those things and we go to like new mediums and we discover growth processes along the way, that's allowing a lot more people to be exposed to new things and realize like, you find one thing that leads you to another thing and another thing. And that's a good process. I'm just early in this path myself. I'm by no means an expert in it. And a lot of people know much more about it than I do. And we kind of just scratched the surface of it tonight. But I think, you guys certainly sound like you're on it as you're talking about all the, interesting things that you talk about. And I think a lot of us are.
Yeah. It's all about the rabbit holes, man.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. The rabbit holes are big, right? And, you go down certain rabbit holes and they just lead you to other rabbit holes and then blast through a wormhole that you're like, wow, if this is true, if what I've just found out is true, I need to rethink everything from the foundation up.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy.
And then you find out they're all connected.
Well, yeah, in a lot of ways. And you find that they kind of lead, they're branches on a tree that kind of lead to the same tree trunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's very Avatar of you to say that. So when's Transmutation coming out, do you think?
Well, we're hoping to have it done next year.
Okay.
And there's a website for it. It's transmutationmovie.com is where you can kind of view the trailer. So it's an independent project. The goal of it, like I said, is to put something that's of deep substance that would never be made by Hollywood ever.
Right. Yeah.
Ever, into something that is something that looks cinematic and looks like it has high production value, even though it's been done by a little tiny team.
Right.
So that's the goal. But because it's a small budget thing, it's on a slow drip process. So we'll hopefully have it done by next year.
Right. And then you'll come back on and talk about it, I hope, before it comes out. That would be great. Yeah,
I'd absolutely love to, man. And documentaries are an interesting one. I mean, so many documentaries are, of course, quite depressing, but it depends on, I think that you can look at the status of the world these days and not be depressed, but, put on the kind of positive hat about like, I understand that, certain things are happening, and then propose, kind of proactive solutions to how we can move on to better things and how can we fix these things one step at a time. And so we can't fix our problems until we start to acknowledge what is really going on. Just being in a quest for the truth, it's like you inevitably will go down these, like, Darren said, rabbit holes, and you'll start realizing that a lot of things are not at all what you've been led to believe through, the way that you were raised in a lot of ways, or the way that you came up in the education system, or, that's a whole nother thing we can talk about for hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What other projects do you have in process then?
I have another project I'm working on that's a short film that was written by somebody else that was on the podcast. And that's an interesting project because that's going to be a narrative project that's kind of got a sci-fi flavoring to it. I find that a lot of my work has this kind of sci-fi theme because science fiction is such, most science fiction isn't about the future, it's about the present. And so it's like science fiction is used as kind of a wrapper to kind of put a magnifying glass on how things societally are really going now.
Huh.
So it's kind of like a thriller. It's a short that's kind of got a thriller sci-fi flavoring to it, but it's being done by somebody that I had on the podcast who knows a lot about kind of very esoteric and ancient things. So it's going to be a really, the script is really popping right now, and it's got so much depth to it because it's got things that are inherently true things that most people will resonate with, because the most kind of seminal artwork that we ever see, things like Avatar obviously is one, but like something like Star Wars or The Matrix, like these things have encoded symbolism in them, and they have themes that resonate with people because they're about things that are timeless. So that's kind of always the goal with projects, is to try and make them not something that's just kind of fluff and style over substance, but try to add as much substance to them as possible. And when you do more inner work on yourself, it's like you can then put it into your projects. So that's the goal.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. We had a couple on that wrote a book, a fantastic book. Rene DeFazio and do you remember his
Tamaravich?
Tamaravich, yeah, his wife's name.
Huh.
And oh my God, it's even we gave it to Darren's wife and she loved it too. And it's a very consciously written book, but it's about past lives and going back from like Atlantis. Basically a love story going back from like Atlantis all the way to current day, but written about a lot of the stuff that we touch on the podcast. And I can't wait for it to come out in a movie. I think they've got some sort of rights, but I think their book needs to be a little more popular before it'll actually get captured as a film or something. I'm not sure how that all works, but yeah. It sounds like that's going to be a great one.
We talked about a lot of this stuff with our buddy Robert W. Sullivan IV too.
Oh, the cinema symbolism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
about the Matrix and about those being like recycled old mythologies. And
Yes, I've heard him before. He's a Mason, I believe.
Yeah.
that's right.
Yes. And he's definitely got some interesting things to say. And, that's an example of somebody that's probably knows some esoteric things. And again, the esoteric means like inner work, knows some deep inner work. And I think as you go down this philosophical path more and do more inner work, you're inevitably led to kind of esoteric things, which then send you down mega wormholes. And somebody like him, after you've done that work, you can then step back and evaluate and look at things and explain things so well, because your vocabulary enriches and you just basically become better at explaining things. So I think somebody like him is probably very good at analyzing and picking out things because he's done this kind of esoteric work. So
what's the name of your short film, do you think? Do you have a name for it yet?
yeah, I think we're going to call it The Master Who Makes the Grass Green.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Sounds
And of course,
cool.
then the question is, who is the master who makes the grass green? And that was actually a phrase that was coined by a gentleman named Robert Anton Wilson.
Yeah, we've heard of him before here. Yeah.
Yeah, he's quite a character, and he wrote a lot of books about kind of conspiracy and his kind of. It was funny because he had a lot of kind of philosophical things that he talked about, but he did it with a sense of humor. I can't remember if it was Oscar Wilde, but there's this great quote. I think it was Oscar Wilde that said, "In order to tell men the truth, make them laugh. Otherwise, they'll try and kill you." So back to like being boiled in oil. It's like if you do things with kind of a comedic flavoring, you're bypassing this kind of cultural conditioning that people have. And somebody that was hugely influential on me, and I've talked about on the podcast quite a bit, was Bill Hicks.
I was just going to say his name. I knew you were thinking of him.
And Hicks was essentially a comedian. And again, back to me saying how much I've learned from comedians. Like Hicks was a comedian that would insert philosophy into comedy. And then people would get uncomfortable. You talked about, we had this talk like an hour ago, Graham, about people, you start telling people about weird shit and they're like, I don't want to hear about that, which is basically like you're starting to talk about philosophical things and people are like, we don't want to hear that. And Bill Hicks had this great joke where he's like, we don't want to hear your philosophy, we want to hear dick jokes.
Yeah.
So that was the dynamic where he'd start talking, he'd have a stand-up routine where he'd start talking about deep things, which he was getting philosophical in his routine, and the audience would get quiet and feel uncomfortable because people are so conditioned to not rethink their paradigms. And I think Hicks had said that he had eaten like his body weight in mushrooms. So he had some amazing, and again, you don't have to use plant medicines to get you there, but like that was an example of something where he had used a lot of things that had kind of cracked his, crown chakra open, and had seen things in amazing ways. And so he then inserted that into his comedy. And then it was like his comedy was so much more enriching because it was philosophical and it was hilarious. So people would listen to it and then it would bypass these conditioning systems.
Yeah, we've played a couple of his clips for a couple intros to our show on psychedelics and stuff. He's got a couple doozies.
I got an excuse to play another one.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's one of those. It's so strange because I hadn't really heard a lot about him until we started doing this podcast, and all of a sudden his name pops up like every 10 episodes.
We had his buddy on.
Yeah, Kevin
Booth.
Kevin Booth. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. And see, this is a growth process for you, Graham. Is that you've started this podcast, and then you found out, you've had all these guests on, and they've introduced you to new things. Yeah. So it's like it just keeps feeding off of itself.
Yeah, and I think it can get overwhelming, actually.
Yeah, it can, and at times you can be kind of bombarded by information, and so it's using again your discernment to pick out what's good information and what's kind of the rubbish stuff. And again, if Sturge's law applies, 90% of the stuff that you might be presented with is crap. But if you're willing to kind of sift through and use discernment to see what's the 10% of gold, you'll really launch from that, and it'll make life more interesting.
Maybe we need more discernment, Darren.
More sifting.
Yeah.
I think my sifting process is pretty good.
Well, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of discernment. I went to a thing recently in San Francisco that was a get together, and it was at somebody's house, and I won't say the person whose house they were at. They wrote a book, and it was a get together, and it was kind of I don't want to use the word of like countercultural get together, but it was it was funny I say that because Bill Hicks always had this term where when he got philosophical, he would say, "This isn't the meeting at the docks, like we're all conspiring to do something." So I was at this get together, and the person whose get together it was said in the get together, "I'm feeling some Palladian energy tonight." So when you hear somebody say something like that, that's just the new version of looking outside yourself, right? So if you're in some sort of, I guess you could say this is kind of a new age thing that people say, which I would kind of say is rubbish. If you're channeling the high council of Sirius or something like that, or feeling Palladian energy, this is all probably bonkers, right? It's like if you're looking to something outside, then that's just kind of a new form of saying the same old things that I think we can kind of move beyond. So again, I always advocate like direct experience.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I like the way you put that. I mean, although sometimes you wonder if there is something outside that keeps getting reinvented, this outside energy. But I do like the way, I mean, I've done, we've experienced a lot of stuff on our own here. And I do like the path of self-development for sure.
Yeah. And it's not about just self-development is important because you can only work on yourself. You can only really help yourself. And then once you help yourself, you can then kind of have a duty to others to help them too. But, nobody can wake anybody else up without them wanting to be woken up. So that's something that kind of is a struggle, isn't it? Where it's like you're interested in something and you want to show your friend this like Sasquatch video or this crop circle video and they're not interested. And that's kind of like maybe on their process, they're not as they are in mainstream reality tunnel and they think there's no validity to any of those things as they're looking at their NASDAQ, charts. And you may be in an area where you're thinking like, hey, there's something here. This is going to lead me to something else. Or at very least, if this turns out to be rubbish, it'll lead me down another path that won't. Yeah. So I hear you. Yeah. And I guess I would say that in terms of something outside of ourselves, I mean, yes, if consciousness is kind of a field and, our brains, the common thing that you might hear is that our brains are kind of TV receivers for this field.
Yeah.
That there seems to be, I mean, all of my kind of personal research has shown me that seems like it could have a lot of validity to it.
Yeah.
And, they talk about, there was this this famous psychic named Edgar Cayce.
Yeah. I've been just listening to one of his books.
Yeah. And Cayce,
or a book on him, sorry. Yeah.
A book on him. Yeah. Cayce was amazing. I mean, anybody that wants to look into Cayce's life, I don't think he was perfect by any means. Nobody is, but he was essentially it's very likely that Cayce was tapping into the Akashic records.
Yeah.
So the Akashic records are essentially like, a library of stored data, which we kind of already talked about in terms of like using the technology metaphor of the cloud, uploading our shit to the cloud. Everything you do in life is very likely recorded in the Akashic records, if that exists. And so if Casey as a psychic is able to tap into that, he is able to instantly download information of past, present, and future. If that's true, then that's quite fascinating.
Yeah, totally. The book I've been listening to is Edgar Casey on the Akashic Records by Kevin J. Todeschi.
So that's just like the old cloud. That's like if our civilization crumbled tomorrow, but the cloud was still going, and someone found an iPhone.
Yeah,
then they'd be the new Edgar Casey.
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, well my Google says.
Yeah,
old cloud. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start using that, Darren. That's brilliant.
Yeah, you can patent pending.
Yeah,
you can have it. Yeah.
The Akashic records are the old cloud. That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
So we should probably start wrapping it up now. Is there anything else you want to chat about, or?
No, man. It's been great chatting with you guys. It's been really nice. I very much enjoyed the show, and it's been, lovely talking to you. And I'll continue listening on my end. And I appreciate what you guys are doing, and it's great to have these things popping up again, like nodes on the network switching on. Where, as we go down our paths of learning and exploring, it's like we'll find all sorts of new mediums like Grimerica. And it's nice that these things exist and are out there.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I'm gonna keep listening to yours too, and I'll keep following you and see what's going on. It's just fascinating to chat with people like yourself. I feel privileged to be able to have these conversations. Really, it's great. Yeah,
it's nice to be able to. The medium is great to allow people like minds to find each other. So that's one of the best things about it.
Where can our listeners track you down if they want more Niles Heckman?
Yeah, well, my personal site is just myname.com. So that's NilesHeckman. And that kind of aggregates to our, I have a little production company that I do that's just kind of for my film projects. And then I have a podcast, which is, of course, like I said, just kind of a tertiary thing I do that's just on my personal site. And then, the site for our kind of film next year, our documentary film, where you can see the trailer, is transmutationmovie.com. So that's where I'm at.
Right on.
Who are you going to get to narrate?
Oh, it's funny. Yeah, the person that I'm collaborating with it on, who people can go check out the trailer and see who that is. Like he has a beautiful like kind of way that he presents the material. So he is actually the narrator. So he's kind of written it and narrated it.
Interesting. Cool.
And he is kind of he's done an amazing amount of inner work, and he helps people with their own kind of inner work through our crazy society today. And it's not like self-help stuff, but it's just kind of like personal development. And he's very good at explaining things. So he has this great way of simplifying and explaining things. And again, as you kind of do more work, your vocabulary increases and you get very good at communicating.
Does he have an English accent?
He does, yes.
Is his initials NK?
Yes.
Not bad.
Yeah, and so
Neil
I've kind
Kramer?
Yeah, I've been trying to get him. I sent him a few emails, but he's been on our list of guests of a wish list, because some of our listeners are like, you have to have him on, blah blah blah. And then I heard him on yours a little bit. So yeah, that's great.
Neil's great. I mean, I've been going down this kind of rabbit hole of research, kind of finding out that things systematically are needing to change at many levels, and so that kind of has inevitably led me to Neil's work and eventually collaborating with him. So
that's great.
He's the writer and the narrator, and then I'm director and cinematographer of the piece. So it's basically the two of us doing this project together. And he has these podcasts he does called Roamcasts, and so this is kind of like a Uber version of one of his high production value podcasts. So it's going to be great.
Rome as in...
We should put a GoPro on you.
Roman? Rome as in roaming, or Rome the city? Rome?
No, not Rome the city at all. As in roaming around,
okay.
When he's roaming.
Cool. Yeah, that's cool. These types of guys are so articulate and so talkative. They can do that, right? There's a couple podcasts of guys that I can just listen to talk to themselves, but I could never do that.
With you, it'd just be like a lot of cool stuff and dead air. Just like,
yeah. lip smacking. Right on.
Yeah.
And the odd curse.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, eh? I mean, I think you guys will have a great project there. I can't wait to see it. I mean, it's one of our favorite topics is that whole evolution and transmutation of consciousness. So I can't wait.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks, man. It should be really good, and we're looking forward to it. And yeah, we'll keep you posted. And yeah, it'd be great to come back on and talk about it once it's done.
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
Right on.
Okay, Niles, it's been great.
Take care.
Yeah. Thanks so much, fellas.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
And welcome back. That was our chat with Niles Heckman. What'd you think, Darren?
That was a fun one. I don't really remember. It was a long time ago. There's a story behind that episode. There was some delay in getting it out, so that was what, 3 or 4 weeks ago now? When was that?
Yeah, I think it was more than that even, yeah. 5 weeks, I think. So thanks
It
for your
was a good
patience,
one, though.
Niles.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was a good one for sure. When, we had a good chat for 2 hours. So this is a long episode. Hopefully you guys made it all the way through.
Yeah, I liked how we talked about the middle path again. It seems to come up a lot, right? Like science and religion on the one side, and we talked about the divine and natural but spiritual path down the middle. And it seems to come up a lot, but it's great how these people can talk about all that, and a spiritual practice goes along with it, and how we create as humans, and how important that creation is in art and other stuff. We talked about the ego death. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to have him back. Of course, he's got his own show. What's his show called again? Do you have that written down there?
I should know it off the top of my head. We talked about it right at the beginning there. Novelty generators, I think.
Yeah, we'll have to link to that. People should check that out. That's how.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Actually, I think I found. We found him through Psychedelic Salon.
Yeah,
that's right, Lorenzo.
Yeah.
We should have Lorenzo on. I think we've tried. I should tweet him again.
Yeah, we should. Do you listen to that one, Red?
Oh yeah, Psychedelic Salon is one of my favorites.
Hasn't come up with an episode in a while.
Oh yeah. As you can hear, we still have Red Pill Junkie here on the outro.
Yeah, he's here for the big reveal.
The big reveal.
Ooh.
Should we do it then? Thanks. So
I need a symbol.
The beauty is we got this email right after we did all the things. So John is viewing us. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Hi, Graham. The target was the Eiffel Tower. Any impressions of tall, metallic, triangular, foreign, massive government France pointed would be valid. Cheers, John.
Son of a bitch.
You know what? Can I tell you something?
Wait, what did he say? Any things of what?
Well, he said the target was the Eiffel Tower. So any impressions of tall, metallic, triangular, foreign, massive, government, France, and pointed would be valid.
Well,
how about an orange basketball? Not quite, eh? Not even close.
Wayne with a med hat said government and tall structures, vertical structures.
Mm-hmm.
Vertical structures, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if Yellowstone is exactly opposite of France.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's along the same coordinates or something like that.
It's the exact. Maybe if you drilled through, maybe it's the underbelly of the super volcano.
No.
No?
No.
Where does that put you?
Can I
It's
tell you
got
a
to be
story?
close. No, it would be somewhere in the middle Pacific.
Can I tell you a
Yeah,
story?
maybe there's a basketball course in the exact middle distance between the Eiffel Tower and Stonehenge.
And that's where Graham comes in.
Yeah.
Maybe Easter Island.
Can I tell you why?
Why?
I was driving back with Mark yesterday from Vancouver to Calgary, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about all kinds of crazy stuff, right? We recorded the podcast on, and of course, remote viewing came up, and I think this exercise came up, and we talked about how he had taken Paul. He asked me, he says, well, are you into that? Do you like, we were asking each other a bunch of questions, and I'm like, well, I took 2 of Paul Elder's courses or whatever. And he says, yeah, I took one as well. And I said, so what was his reveal? Because I was a little bit not pissed off, but I was wondering why in both of my courses at different times and with Paul Elder, and I talked to him about how we had him on the show and all that. I said, both times it was the Eiffel Tower. And he said, yeah, I know, it was the Eiffel Tower for him too. And I go, why would he put the Eiffel Tower in 2 different Calgary courses?
And now it's Eiffel Tower again.
And now it's Eiffel Tower again. I was just
so you knew it, you just didn't
know it.
You didn't go with your gut.
I knew it and I didn't know it.
Dumbass.
No, but why would Paul Elder and this guy put Eiffel Tower in, right? We did.
Yeah.
We fucking mentioned it.
I don't know if we talked about it on the show, but we talked about it maybe at work. I remember talking about the Eiffel Tower 2 times. We've had this conversation before. Or I've got deja vu because we did. We just hit a glitch in the hard drive of the simulated
I think we did.
Universe.
Yeah, we're looping.
Loopers.
Yeah, the Eiffel Tower is making us loop.
I suppose that's a good point as any to wrap it up on.
I guess so. That's pretty interesting.
As always, support the show. Help us with our gas. Grimerica.ca/support. Sign up the newsletter, Grimerica.ca/news. Review the show, Grimerica.ca/iTunes. Voicemail.
And email Spamgram.
And Spamgram. And big thanks to Red for joining us. Oh, yeah, we did. The other thing we wanted to push was bloggers. We haven't talked about in a while that we are always looking for new bloggers. So if you're interested, just Spamgram or shoot me an email and we'll get you set up. And yeah, we've got some great bloggers, some great art going up on the site now. Have you checked out the new webcomic at all, Red?
Haven't had much time.
Yeah, you'll have to.
I will do so.
Yeah,
I will do so.
Napoleon's got there must be 4 or 5 issues up there now. They're pretty. You'll love them for sure. You'll read all of them. There's little Easter eggs in there.
Yeah, thanks. Great. Looking forward to it.
You might even be featured in there in 1 or 2 of them.
Oh yeah, he is too, isn't he? Yeah.
The luchador himself.
Yeah, that's right. So, come if you're looking for a place to write and express yourself in some other form, shoot us an email, and you can call Grimerica home. Yeah,
thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for coming along, Red. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks to Niles, and we will see you next week.
Dawn of a golden age. Dream a new dream, love a new love. Unlock your mind, make friends with time. But this is our day.
You think that's air you're breathing now?